I liked how we kind of emulated the main title sequences of each movie for our chapter stops here. I think those are kind of fun little animations.
Yeah, it was interesting. Me and Luke were talking the other day about how like different movies, some use Roman numerals, some use numbers, so it's really confusing in the book and here too. Like, is part 2 part Roman numeral 2 or number 2? Like I think you said, Luke, the copyright in the movies doesn't always match.
Yeah, like I know part 5 doesn't even say part 5 New Beginning as far as the copyright goes. It's
Wow.
and also the opening title just says Friday 13th, A New Beginning.
Which just shows what big geeks we are that we care whether it was in Roman numeral or it was a,
Well, it's hard because like part 3 at the end and the beginning it says part 3 Roman numerals, but I'm like, when I put it part 3 in the book, it looked weird because everyone's used to seeing it as part number 3 on the poster.
Right.
And I know fans are gonna write and say, well, it should be part 3. So.
I kind of look at it as what has more. Like part 3, there's more stuff that points to the number 3 because the trailer had the number 3.
Yeah.
Right. But the
And
main
then
title
3D
was
as
the...
well.
And then the poster, and then
3D,
also
yeah.
3D.
Yeah.
Right, but the Roman numeral 3 was used in the credits as
Yes.
it popped out.
Yep.
But again, it shows how much sort of attention to detail we put into all this. That we, at least if you don't think we got it right, at least we thought of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Didn't they just make 6 of them?
But John Buechler, he was brought in to direct number 7, and I think we said a little bit earlier, he's a neighbor of mine, and he actually did the makeup effects for Halloween 6, which I wrote, and so we got to work together on that. And he'd already done Friday 7 at the time, so it was kind of cool where I was able to, even back then, talk to him about this movie. And
I remember he has a real love of effects. Like when I interviewed him, he invited me to his studio and showed me all his creations, and like he lives and breathes this stuff.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
He truly loves
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, and it's like it's like when you get to visit like MMI, which was his company at the time, and Stan Winston's company. When you go in and certainly have to point out K&B. I mean, when you go into those places, I've been fortunate enough to go to all of them, and I think Peter, you've been to at least a few of them. It's just like walking into like behind the scenes of Disneyland or something, but like the scary Disneyland.
It does feel like magical. Like at K&B, I got lucky enough to go there too. And you walk in, like you see all these things you see from
everything
movies.
from Aliens and
everyone loves
every horror movie that you can imagine from the past 20 or 30 years. Like there's artifacts from all that stuff.
You can tell the people that work there love working there. They had this smile,
Yeah.
'cause who wouldn't?
Yeah, and like Greg Nicotero, who's in the show, and a huge just fan. I mean, it's not a put on. I mean, these guys do this stuff because they love it, and just always so willing to share stuff. Like the most rare things. Like he's got things from Jaws that Steven Spielberg gave him. Just really rare shit that and there you are holding it, and it just feels like you're holding a little piece of history.
I actually got to meet him at a screening of Reanimator at again the New Beverly in Hollywood, and Stuart Gordon was there, and everyone goes and talks to him because he's the director. But I immediately went to Buechler and said, "Thank you for doing Jason in Part 7," because he also did makeup for this film, and his Jason looks. The Jason in Part 7 to me is like the definitive Jason. I've always loved the look of it.
Right.
And what I wish I would have known this then when I met him, but we're actually from the same hometown.
Huh.
Belva, Illinois, right across the river from St. Louis.
Nice.
And while I went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, he went to the other branch, SIUE in Edwardsville.
Cool.
So it's kind of weird to have this hometown as well as college connection to him.
There's just there's something about this movie that too, and I have to say it too. I mean, personal stories. I had just moved to Los Angeles. This is around the time that Frank got me the meeting for the series, and he also invited me to the cast and crew screening of this movie on the Paramount lot. And I went with my friend Robert Drake, and there we were, just sitting there, and I'm feeling like a total, like I've never been to a movie studio lot in my life, and I'm sitting there, and everybody's around me, and I remember Jennifer Banco walking in with this giant, like, Shirley Temple outfit with a huge bow on her head. And I was like, who's that girl? But everybody was there, and I remember Billy Butler running around like a wild man, like chasing people around the auditorium. And I don't know, I just have these vague memories of what happened that night. I wish I'd taken photos. But I think I was just so sort of, in awe of being there. And there's Jennifer. We got Jennifer to kind of finally come out of nowhere, and there was a rumor too, right, Luke, of many people that she had died.
Oh yeah, and even after we posted her picture on Facebook, people were like, "No, she's dead. She's
really
dead."
Yeah,
it's like, no, this is her, alive and well.
Well, that happened to Joan Freeman from Part 4 for a long time.
Didn't say she committed suicide?
Yeah, on her IMDb page there was no Joan Freeman. This was before Facebook, so things got corrected. But yeah, for a long time, I thought she was.
You thought she was dead?
Yeah, I was like, maybe she really is dead.
Wow. But But yeah, this was this one was shot in Alabama, and like part 6 was done in the South, but has a totally different look from the first couple of movies. But it was also the first one to bring Kane Hodder onto the scene, and Kane became the definitive Jason, as everyone knows.
When too, again, talking about the practical effects, like when they show his teeth, and like that's not CGI,
right?
So it's like amazing how they did that.
Yeah, there's Terry Kaiser, who again, somebody who chose not to participate. He just didn't want to do an interview. I wished he had. It would have been really fun to interview him because he's such a memorable character. I think he is kind of the villain. Other than Jason, he's kind of the antagonist of the movie.
You can argue he's more villainous than Jason because he knows what he's doing.
Right. He's consciously just manipulating everybody around him. Yeah. But and he was great in this. I don't know why we wouldn't want to talk about it. But again, it's sort of continuing Tom's, kind of template of, kind of an unstoppable Jason that can be reanimated with, lightning bolts and psychic energy.
But I think Giekler said that he wanted to be like 3 different movies. The first act is like Firestarter, the second is like a standard Stalker / Jason movie, and then the final act is sort of like the Carrie Tale kind of like stuff. I think he does have that kind of structure.
Yeah.
Like 3 definite acts to it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
I had been a fan of movies.
And there's Kane. I mean, wow. I mean, nobody was a greater steward of the role of Jason Voorhees than Kane Hodder over the years. Wow. I mean, that guy just
super nice guy.
He's super nice, but he also just really embraced it, and people became. He became just known as he was synonymous with Jason. I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's no one who became more known for a particular character in this series than Kane.
Well, people forget that until then Jason didn't have an identity. Like it wasn't like Robert Englund was the same guy played him. Up till then, Jason was always a stuntman. This is the first time you associated a name with Jason at all.
Yep. And just again, like the conventions, and really worked it and kept this series alive for so long. Even though some of the can be argued that some of the movies are the the lesser of the canon of the series, but I think there was something about having Kane in it that just sort of made people like, okay, if you were a diehard fan and it was Kane Hodder, you were gonna go see that.
Yep.
Now this one's Tommy's favorite too, isn't it?
Yeah, this is Tommy, our producer, Tommy Hudson's favorite Friday the 13th, and I think, like you, there's a nostalgic trip. I think it was the first one he saw in theaters. In the theater. But Tommy likes this one. I mean, like you, Peter, I'm just confused by sometimes the geography of this movie, where like just people are colliding into each other in the middle of the woods and running around in these random places.
Yeah, I never really got an understanding of how far the houses were from each
other. Right. But I think there was still something kind of. It was in that era when the Friday the 13th were kind of safe but scary, but safe fun. There was that. It was that kind of thing.
Well, also of course too. Again, 7 was really harmed by the cuts.
Probably more so than any of them. I think we keep saying that, but I think really this is the one that got, and I think is infamous among fans more than any about in terms of like they demand an uncut version, and I'm hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I even had to break this news to Beekler at the time when we did the deluxe editions that footage was discarded. It was trashed. And we're talking about Susan Jennifer Sullivan, who's like again another villain in this movie. There's a lot of villains in this movie.
She's a great villain,
but she was like the uber bitch, and she was perfect. I remember seeing her later on an episode of Charles in Charge. I don't know why I remember her from that. But she was. I don't know if she was a semi-regular. And the Friday the 13th. There it is. And I don't know if I coined that phrase or somebody in the book coined that. I forgot who originally said
Jeff
it.
Bennett.
Jeff Bennett.
He played Eddie, I think. So guy.
Yeah, and I think Peter was the first one to kind of out this particular movie, which I think was funny and but true.
But again, it was one of those things where I didn't have that plan. Like it was just doing interviews that started to come out that way. Come out. So it just sort of that was just the tone and the color of the making of the movie. And
well, it's like Nightmare 2 is the gayest horror movie ever made, and I think without you got to acknowledge it. Yeah, I think we had more fun acknowledging it in Never Sleep Again than we did, kind of bringing that out here. There were some people who to this day just weren't really comfortable with kind of being, identified as such. So we really didn't, I mean, I'll let people draw their own conclusions, but at the same time, it's other than Kevin, who I think is out of the closet and all of that. But
I mean, for me, what's fascinating was growing up, I didn't notice these things. Even when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I had no when I was 11, I didn't.
Right.
I didn't see the gay subtext, so now it's so obvious.
Right.
So what's interesting to me is like how different these films are read today.
Well, what's
so
funny
I didn't think,
too,
like,
though, I don't think this movie
it.
necessarily has gay subtext. It just has a very gay cast.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Nightmare 2 not only had
Yes,
a lead
definitely.
character that was gay, but had crazy subtext.
But I mean, like now when I was researching the book and stuff, and you start going to message forums, people say, "Oh God, they seem so gay," like.
Right.
But no one noticed it before, so you
right.
can't really not mention the sense because it's kind of it's become sort of a known. People say, "Oh."
And I just think in this day and age, if anybody has a problem with that, then I think that has to kind of be their problem.
Yeah.
But but I think it's another interesting side note about the making of these movies. And hey,
Well, and horror movies, slasher movies, particularly, have a big gay fan base.
right?
So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
very much so.
Just for the creativity of
Yep.
I know, Dan, we've talked about this. What do you... Is it because, like, the final girl is kind of the outsider, or how do you...
Well, I'll let Peter tell that because it's really why I identified. I think that's why Peter and I connected the way we did when we first met. It was partly because he was able to articulate some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt that when you're gay or you feel like an outsider at all when you're growing up, I mean, you're going to totally identify with the final girl who is also an outsider. And again, her strength came from not being a part of the social group. She was smarter. She was aware. So you were rewarded and praised for not being the cheerleader or the jock. So I mean, you never saw that kind of. So you weren't. There wasn't gay representation, but you were. That experience was being represented in this character.
Mm-hmm.
That sense of isolation, and then you became the hero and you're being praised for it. So I mean, usually other teen films, if you watch like even John Hughes films, I mean, usually there's some homophobia in the sense like the gay characters are made fun of,
Right.
Usually
The
mocked.
object of the joke.
Yeah, they're derision, and there is never any gay derision in any of these films I can think of.
Or homophobia, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah. And the opposite, it's usually the straight, carefree people that get killed.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, John Carpenter says it best when he talks about Halloween, but I think that the theme holds true with all of this entire genre of films. It's the revenge of the repressed.
Yeah.
Michael Myers was repressed. Jason, in a weird way, is a repressed character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's that kind of connection between that villain and that survivor that has to go head to head at the end.
Yeah, Daryl Haney, who wrote Part 7, when I interviewed him, he told me, I don't think I put it in the book, but that after many years had passed, and he looked up Friday the 13th one day, just out of curiosity, he saw these like forums, and he'd see all these kids talking about, my mom hates me, I'm depressed, I want to kill myself, but I love these movies, and they help me feel better. And he was really touched by how much that kind of outsider contingent. And also you have to talk about like the goth kids and
it's not just one subset of any minority. I guess you're just anybody who feels alienated when you're an adolescent. I think can identify with these movies. Yeah,
and so it's always that kind of outsider who doesn't quite belong who is the hero.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But also, isn't there something even more to it, Peter? I think where you had said, and maybe it was on the commentary you did for the Warner Brother release of the first movie, and I think and if I recall, and I might be paraphrasing you here a little bit, but you were talked about how that there's a strength in not only being able to kind of be identified as a hero, but the fact that as somebody who is kind of victimized or marginalized in society, that the theme of these movies is that you can survive.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm thinking Michael is shaking the van. It's actually Jason.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it.
For some reason, we don't want to have sex anymore.
I don't think I've ever seen him killing like that, where he just takes, his head.
I feel like
on top and one under his chin.
I feel like that there's a lot to be said about just the heroism of these movies, and also just the and it's I think it's very simplistic to say it's just the victims being kind of like lined up and one by one.
Oh yeah, no.
I think there's more to it.
Yeah, I mean the sense that you can survive the night, you can, even though at the end you can't vanquish evil. You still go on, and you survive. You can live in that world and continue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because like the older movies from the 40s and the 50s, you had to kill evil and normality was restored.
Right.
In these movies, that actually never happened.
And normality being,
straight,
heterosexual, boy meets girl, all of that kind of thing. And there's a thematic thing in these movies, like where at the end it's like Kevin and Laura in the ambulance, or Scott Reeves and Jensen Daggett at the end of 8. There's the kind of the boy-girl thing. But it's always seems to be that the girl is the one who has to rescue the guy.
Yes. That's
Kevin
true.
Blair is not the guy fighting Jason at the end. It's Lar and using her magical abilities, and it's also Jensen having to throw the toxic waste.
We're also getting esoteric. Maybe I'm getting too esoteric again, but you could also argue that the films became a little more regressive in a sense as they went on, because in the early ones it was always just the girl, and later on they started adding the kid and the guy character.
Right.
The original ones there was never another character with the girl usually at the end. It was only by herself.
Right.
It really wasn't until, I guess, 6.
Yeah.
When you had the male.
Well, unless you count. Yeah. Well, actually, Tommy and Trish would have been a pair.
Yeah, 4.
And 4, and then 5, Reggie and Pam.
Yeah.
And Tommy.
But I mean, like in final chapter, she's left alone. Eric Anderson gets killed.
Right. Yeah.
And Tommy's too young at that point
to do any good, really.
And
but again, Tommy is a repressed character.
Yeah.
Like if you're a nerd or an outsider, or again you're out, you feel like an outcast in some way. I mean, he embodied that character in a very real, very very tangible way for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why a lot of people did. I think that's why Tommy Jarvis survived 3 of these movies.
Mm-hmm. It was his own little trilogy.
Absolutely. So I think, and I think we're not pointing out one, oh my God, that's one of our favorite photos, wasn't it? Of Susan Blue being
speared. Yeah,
it was really great. And Susan Blue is one of the premier, voice actors of the motion picture industry. I mean, she does cartoons and she does ADR and she does, she is like a vocal maestro.
She was RC in Transformers.
That's right. That's right.
Well, too, I shouldn't say funny. Well, I guess it's funny is the way Dr. Cruz pushes her in front of Jason and kills her. It's
right.
It's so cruel. Total villain. Yeah.
Right.
He's worse than Jason. Absolutely.
Yeah. He's a menace.
Yeah.
But again, it's sad to me that this was John Buechler's, and this is the only remaining version of this footage. Is this very poor, VHS 27 or whatever it is, number of years.
I vividly remember seeing this on opening day, and you could feel the deflation in the audience because people are like, he's gonna kill him, and
and then they just cut away.
And everyone's like, oh,
But that's still, I mean, she played such a great villainess, and sad to say, I think she passed away, and it's still up in the air a little bit. I mean, we've heard reports that she did die, and then maybe she's not. I mean, we have her on the, on the memorial list at the end of the show, but I think sadly Susan Jennifer Sullivan passed away.
I mean, I do know when I tried to contact her in 2003, I received a call back from someone, I don't know if it was a manager, saying she's not well, right? She's not able to.
But it was serious. It wasn't like it was flu. She had like a serious disease, leukemia or cancer or something like that.
And so I didn't, obviously press it
and we
anymore,
really searched for any information from family.
Yeah.
There was one obituary we came across somewhere near Boston that might have been her, but then we heard it might not be her. So sadly, I hate to say I think she passed way too young.
We have the great street scene where she goes right.
I think that, again, going to the third act of this movie, I mean, it was a great battle because now it was Jason had a foe that could do something, really do something. I think he didn't know what he was up against.
I think it's true that I think the series needed at this point. Like, you needed something more. Like, there's another movie of him in the woods just attacking a teen.
Yeah.
It had to be upped a little
bit. What's kind of cool too is that the budget didn't go up exponentially on this movie, but the Buechler being kind of a master of effects and trickery was able to pull off all this mechanical stuff as well.
Yeah, I don't think a director who wasn't steeped in effects could have probably done it because they wouldn't have known how to orchestrate it.
Yep, a lot. I mean, the bridge collapsing and things flying around, and there's a lot of just mechanical stuff going on. Again, no CGI.
And Kane was such an experienced stuntman too. He could pull all this off.
Well, he got whammed on this hit here, falling with this falling porch.
Yeah, it looks painful.
Hit me so hard and with such force.
I mean, that had to hurt. Ouch.
We had special effects in that movie that were actually kind of in competition with the killing. I mean, we had TVs flying across the room and
flying televisions.
And, well, too, it's interesting because, again, going back to the first movie, being advertised as you're going to see a series of creative deaths. By this point, that wasn't new anymore.
Right.
You couldn't.
They had to give something else. So I think this was at the time when they originally were starting to kind of think along the lines of a Freddy versus Jason, and they couldn't make that happen for rights issues between New Line and Paramount. So I think their compromise at this point was to keep this franchise going, was to give him a foe in the form of like this Carrie clone. And I think that, that's where this all came from. But, a lot of cool things in this, like Luke mentioned. I mean, the makeup for Jason is really,
it's great.
very, very memorable and really well constructed.
And that moment when she psychically blows the mask off him.
Totally cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a
yeah.
great moment.
Amazing.
I know Buechler said in his interview that he wanted like every bullet wound, every cut,
hit, yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I think to his fans, I appreciated that he respected the continuity of the character.
Right. Although, you know, I talked about earlier when we started this chapter was, you know, how many years after part 6 is this? How long has he been hiding it? You know, been pitched at the bottom of the lake? We just don't know.
This should be like the year 2012.
Right.
Yeah.
By then.
Yeah.
I love the way she tells the story about how they're going to blow up a house and they've got all these explosives ready to detonate and the whole crew is smoking.
Yeah.
Watch it.
You know, Dan, we haven't talked about this. It's actually not in the doc, but Ian Patterson, the producer, didn't he play the double of the kid who gets whacked in the face?
Russell, yeah. Ian Patterson is the guy who this Ian Patterson, who's the producer and worked on the TV series, first season of the TV series. He kind of doubled and did the stand-in, you know, for Russell.
There when they filmed the cabin exploding.
I wish we'd gotten, again, some of the other victims from this movie would have been fun to interview, but not everybody was available or even wanted to participate. So you just have to kind of respect people's wishes and say, hey, we appreciate you considering it. If you change your mind, let us know. So
also, like 20 people get killed in the movie.
Oh yeah, it's a long list. Heidi Kozak, I think we were close to getting her. We just, you know, for whatever reasons, just people decide they don't want to do it.
I would have loved to have her just because she's in Slumber Party Massacre too.
I wanted to talk about. I mean, I hate to say, but you know, Slumber Party Massacre is a great example of, you know, we talk about feminism in these movies. I mean, it was directed by a woman, and you know, it's really.
Juliette Cummins was in that one as well.
Yeah, that's right. Barbara Sachs. I hate to say, talk about another villain involved with this movie. You know, this woman really gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
I have to say, from a personal story, I got kind of a nasty letter from her once. During these years, when I was keeping up this kind of pen pal thing with Frank, I got kind of a nasty gram out of Barbara Sachs. Like, she had intercepted my letter and just was like, well, we can't talk about Friday the 13th with you. You know, it wasn't like, don't write to us again, but it was very like a form letter. I was like, wait a minute, I know Frank Mancuso. Who are you? But she really was kind of like, I hate to use the word, but she was kind of the shrew of Part 7.
Well,
I think she was the bane of Buechler's, you know, existence at that point.
There's a lot of stories I didn't put in the book that were very favorable, so...
Yeah, I mean, we contacted her. She didn't want to do the interview. You know, we said, look, you know, this is your chance to speak out. And she said she really had nothing to say. So, but, you know, in her defense, and I don't know if I can defend her, but I think she was brought into Frank's company called Hometown Films when he was really branching out into other kinds of movies. He Said, She Said, and like the movie you referenced earlier, Permanent Record, all that stuff. Those were the movies she was hired to develop for his company. She kind of got saddled with this Friday the 13th thing. It was never anything she had any interest in. But it was kind of part of the company mandate, part of the company, you know, list of projects in development. And there she was. She had to do the job. I just don't think she was the right person for the job. But yeah, everybody really kind of gets on her case, to say the least. I wish she'd come on just to say a few words. I mean, maybe we would have seen a much different side of her. You never know.
Always just seemed to be somebody in the way.
So, I guess he says it. Look, I'm not putting in words in anybody's mouth. This is exactly how people, you know, this was supposed to be the original makeup for John Otrin's sort of resurrection scene. And I mean, I'm glad we have these photos, but, you know, it would have been kind of impressive to see what they would have done.
Yeah, it's one of the things, you know, like when you do a documentary or a book is all you can do is go to someone, offer them an opportunity to speak.
Yep. And, if they choose not to, you can't force somebody to do something they don't want to do. And I'm telling, and again, I've said this has been my repeated sort of, you know, kind of thing. And Luke has asked me, you know, throughout the process of this, well, did you try this person? Did you try? Yeah, we tried everyone. There was no one that, if you don't see them, the reason they're not on the show is they either weren't available, they weren't willing, or they're no longer with us.
What about the caterers?
Well, we didn't try.
I think
though I heard the caterer on Part 3, who's a huge caterer now, Tony's Catering. Like, they were eating like lobster dinners on the set. I mean, it was like full on, you know, big time, meals.
I think, was it Larry who said he gained 10 pounds?
Well, he had to.
Yeah, sure.
For years, fans have demanded a home video release of the film in its fully restored form.
With the book, one of the things I enjoyed the most was just all the details. 'Cause I think it was with Part 3. His name escapes me. The actor who played Harold.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Steve Sussman.
Because didn't you actually get his wife, like, to do some quotes or something?
Well, I interviewed him, but then he
passed away.
In an accident, and so she did a follow up and, you know, said how much the fans meant to him. And he still got letters and things. So yeah,
I
that
have to
was
say
nice.
right there, that's the actual memo from Paramount okaying the order to junk all of the outtakes from this movie. That's the actual signed memo. That's the thing that we found in the box when we were doing the deluxe editions, and I just happened to have a scan of it. I was like, well, here it is. If fans don't believe me, that's as real as it gets. I didn't make it up. It is lost. So there will never be, you know, the uncut definitive version of this movie. It's too bad because it would have been a cool one. This is a movie that was ready made for a special edition.
Absolutely.
Of all of them, this is the one.
It made me ultimately very dissatisfied.
But I do feel bad for John. I think he put a lot of creativity into this movie, and it just wasn't, you know, you couldn't appreciate it because it was all left on the editor, you know, editing room floor.
Well, it's like you said, you know, it's like a punchline, a joke with no punchline. That's what it was like.
Yeah, totally. And Lar Park Lincoln, who doesn't have any hyphens in her name, as Luke has discovered. She was cool in this movie, and she's a nice person.
Yeah,
she's had some battles with her own health over the past few years, but man, she's strong. Yeah, and her husband too, but who passed away, but she really is a fighter.
Yeah. She was very successful. She created something called the Freedom Bag,
okay,
which for a long time was the biggest selling item in Home Shopping Network. Or
wow,
CBC.
Yeah, she's got a lot of businesses. She's like a real entrepreneur.
Yeah, total. Totally. She does classes, I think.
Yeah, she still teaches acting and.
I remember that brought Friday back to the number 1 spot in the box office. I remember that because Part 6 did not hit number 1, right? I believe.
Right. No, it didn't. It fell behind Aliens.
Yeah, close.
But Nightmare 4 really was kind of, you know, it was all, at this point, the tides had turned toward Freddy.
Yeah.
This, you know, Friday did pretty well, but, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street was definitely the reigning champ at this point.
In Hollywood. How awesome is that? So here we are. We're in the movie, the 8 o'clock show or something.
I like these behind the, you know, like the, you know, there they were kind of, all the 80s hair. And
it's a very 80s movie. It feels very 80s.
Right. Well, 8 even more.
Yeah, true.
Every time somebody got killed, they count them.
It's just amazing, the movie magic.
And Luke, tell the story about Taco Bell.
I know. I haven't heard it.
The Taco Bell in Burbank, right across from Warner Brothers, has a bunch of child headshots, like of child actors.
From this era, though.
They kind of stopped at I think they capped off around 1995. Because from Little Rascals is up there, just like Kimmy Gibbler from Full House.
I was gonna say.
And I mean, honestly, it's kind of talking about her as how we got her, because I pointed out that Jennifer Banco's headshot was up there. So again, we thought she was dead, but then I remember Dan was over at my place. We started talking about her more, and then that's when Dan was like, you know, I'm gonna take another look. Let's see. And then she's living in Hawaii.
And she just happened to be planning a trip to LA around that time. She goes, I'll make it coincide with everything. So that's how we got Jennifer the last minute. So it was cool. It's great to have, you know, when people are excited to be a part of it. That's when I get excited, because it's, you know. You know that these movies meant something to them more than just, you know, a gig. So, and I think Jennifer just did her first convention. I think Tommy booked her in her first convention a month ago maybe. But this is my dream movie. If we could get all the surviving girls together for one last hurrah, to me that should be Part 13. That should be the next movie. That's the one that we all want. In fact, Frank and I have kind of discussed it, and how do we find a way to do this, you know? But I think there's a lot more powerful forces at work behind the series now than, you know, than we can really kind of vet. But it would be really fun to see that movie. I hope one day they make it.
The fact that we could pay it off with the special effects and so forth.
It's a shame they never brought Tina on for another film.
It would have been cool to see her.
Yeah.
The success of the movie.
I just think this is one of the best interstitials we have, just because of Harry's music under it. It's hilarious.
Reminds me of the teaser trailer.
Yep. And I think going into the 8th movie, I think it was like, now what? You know, what do we do? And I think that's really, you know, where they were at this point.
Well, yeah, I think Randall Shoveldave, the producer, said, you know, if they didn't get him out of the woods, there wouldn't be another Jason. I think it's true. How many more, him in the woods could you do?
Yep.
Vancouver.
Yep, Vancouver stands in for. Yeah.
Gotta point
Jeff
out,
Katz has got the best quotes about the location, you know, than anybody. I couldn't say it nearly as well or half as fast as Jeff Katz
I will
does.
go on record though, like when I saw this in the theater, me and my friend had a really good time. And we're going, "Oh, this is really fun." I didn't hate it like I did like 5. Like I wasn't as disappointed.
Yeah, you weren't angry because you were sort of offended by it. You were just sort of angry because it's like, wait, that wasn't New York.
I just remember, I think at that point, my expectations, I didn't have much expectations anymore. And I'm like, okay, we're at part 8. It's Manhattan. I mean, it's going to be a funny, goofy movie. Like, I don't think you could do Jason Manhattan seriously. I mean, would he really be scary?
No, I think the problem that people had was it was 90% cruise ship and then 10% New York.
I mean, because I kept thinking, like, just jump in a cab. Like, Jason can't get you.
Right. In a city of 8 million. There he finds them all.
Anyway,
But
I actually think, like, Jason on the cruise ship on its own movie might have been better.
Yeah.
Because then you wouldn't feel cheated, at least.
Well, they should have just said, Jason takes a cruise or whatever. But I think, look, and Rob Hedden, talk about an example of a director who came, I think you mentioned briefly that he came from the television series. He had directed several episodes that, they really liked, and, they gave him a chance to do a feature. And write and direct.
Again, like Tom McLaughlin's such a nice guy. Like, just really...
Right. As is Rob.
That's on it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, JJ.
Yeah. And I love that, I mean, again, like, we have Kelly Hu, who, went on to a pretty big career, X2 and Scorpion King, and she's still working quite a bit.
Tiffany Paulson,
Tiffany Paulson
now.
Yeah, we didn't get to touch on that in the show, but yes, she wrote the Nancy Drew movie, and she's a very, very active screenwriter in the business. She's very nice.
So in a way, these movies, they give people a shot to get into the business, not necessarily they stay with acting, but whatever they plan to do.
It's an intro.
Yeah.
But again, she has a great sense of humor about all of it, and she gets it.
He could come back just because he feels like it.
I always thought that was hilarious. They just happened to have this identical hockey mask just sitting there on the...
Well, I bring them with me every time
I do. Well, I know I put them in the hospital drawer when I'm recovering from...
Like next to my Bible.
But I'm not making any digs at part 5 whatsoever.
You can't. It's perfect.
But
makeup changed so much from movie to movie.
But there's some things to be appreciated about this movie. I think we could find a few.
It's a different makeup effects person.
Yeah, I thought it's well shot, and it's very colorful.
And the mountains of Vancouver are something to be desired, but
that's right. Well, there's mountains in the East Coast, right?
Well, not in New York.
No,
and certainly not New Jersey.
Yeah,
they call them hills.
Okay,
but that's.
Goo is great.
But I actually worked for the MPAA. Believe it or not, that was my day job when this movie was made. So I actually was lucky enough to be able to go down and watch while the ratings board was watching this movie. I got to watch it from the projection booth. So I got to see
the uncut?
Yeah. Yep. And it was almost like it was like an editor's cut. It wasn't a finished, product. So you could see the editor's marks on the film and all of that stuff. But and a very like temp music.
Do you remember?
I should have had, if we had the technology we have today, I could have just been with a camcorder or a flip cam.
Do you remember it having like a distinct different feel? Like
No, I do remember it just being bloodier.
Yeah.
And the gore was almost exaggerated.
Yeah.
It was kind of so over the top that, and I love this. This is from the gag reel with, Kane wearing a dildo.
I think he said that's one of the only times I ever did a joke as Jason.
Right. And he really got upset. Like, he didn't want that ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, at the time. I think now he doesn't care. But back then, he was like, please don't, it almost like, to him, it would ruin the persona he was trying to put across. But, VC Dupree, he was really a lot of fun. We interviewed him for the deluxe edition. He came back for this, and really cool guy.
We had to get him on a cruise ship in New York.
I mean, I love that, we bring up all these sort of, like, imponderable things about the series. This one being, how do you get a boat, how does a boat float from Crystal Lake into the Atlantic Ocean?
It's possible.
Lake means lake. By definition, it's an enclosed body of water. There's no bay. It's not Crystal Bay.
It's a ferry.
They just teleported the houseboat.
Jason can teleport.
Yeah. Now he teleports in the disco.
Like now, you start seeing it has that almost early '90s feel. Like you start
a little bit. Fashions are changing a bit.
Yeah.
There's Charlene Martin. Charlene is, she's a Vancouver native, and her son Alexander Ludwig is now a budding young actor. He's in the Hunger Games and Witch Mountain. So she kind of manages his career now.
Behind the scenes was eliminating everyone.
A number of young
some cool outtakes, little pieces of things. So Elizabeth Berkley would audition for Rennie, as did Dee Dee Pfeiffer, who was Michelle Pfeiffer's sister.
Because
her evil uncle.
I love he's doing his makeup.
I do too. He was doing his makeup while we were shooting his interview.
Oh.
Yeah, he only wants to be photographed from that side.
Interesting.
That's why he's facing in a slightly different direction than we would have lit him for. But he's he's a veteran actor. He's just been around forever. He was in the Twilight Zone and Dynasty, and in fact, I was flipping channels last night. He was on an old episode of Charlie's Angels. Like he was one of those guys that just worked constantly in the 60s, 70s.
Gave me a lot of ideas and how he could trap them.
That was a cool kill, actually. Jason X had something similar when he was the rotating.
Oh, on the he's screwed that
one. The screwed one. It was a little bit like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Semi. Fred Mullen. I have to talk about Fred for just a minute. What a great guy. And I have this song, "Darkest Side of the Night." I really wanted to use it in the show, but the sync rights and the publishing rights are really expensive. But Fred actually was one of the first interviews we did when we did this next round for this show. And his, out of the 150 interviews, was the only one that was lost to technology. It just died. It was shot, it was recorded, and it just, when they were transcoding the footage, it was missing. So this cool interview we had with the composer of Part 8 in the TV series and 7 just wasn't, it just doesn't exist. So I'm sorry to say that we didn't get to feature Fred.
Great guy, really nice guy.
Yeah, I think it might have been tough for him because a lot of people are like, oh, it's not Harry. And...
Right. Yeah. There's Lee Coleman, and he was cast as the original Sean. This is the guy that they let go in like the first couple days of production. This is the actual outtake of one of the only scenes this guy shot.
I think it's great that you come and talk about it.
Yeah.
People would.
Yeah, and I think there's some people had their own opinions of why he was let go, and I honestly don't think those opinions are true.
Yeah.
Not from everything I know. I don't know. I just think it was just a chemistry thing, like she's saying.
Thank God for the producers, because they really said,
and Jensen Daggett's very funny. She's like, well, he was hot too, as long as I had a hot guy. But he was very nice, and I think I have to give him some props. I mean, he was very brave to come in and say, hey, here I was. And actually, what he told us was he had gone for a jog one night, and he in Stanley Park in Vancouver, and took a really bad fall, and his face was really beaten up, like scarred, like he had bruises. He had a bruise down the side of his cheek, and he's like, I think, at least in his mind, that was the reason he was let go, or that was the reason that they gave him.
He's like so much taller. It seems like than Scott Reeves.
Yeah, Scott's like tiny.
It's interesting.
Scott, and there's Kelly Hu, and again, it's Saffron Henderson. Man, did I beg to get her in this, but
I tried too.
Yeah, she doesn't want to talk. She's still working in Canada.
Her dad's apparently was a really famous guitarist or musician in Canada too. So.
See, I heard Fred actually did all the guitar playing for her.
Okay,
I'm not sure if that's true.
I don't know.
This is
that's the actual flying V.
Guitar, and right here you'll notice
totally,
or
lead it forward. That's the one, yeah.
Forensics evidence.
But
I think every Friday the 13th has to have the promiscuous girl who is caught doing something naughty.
It's true.
She pays.
Come and get it. She was the queen.
Those are always my favorite
characters. She made everybody buzz around her.
Yeah, I have to say of the two, I think Susan Jennifer Sullivan was the stronger, evil bitch.
She probably had more to do too. Maybe.
Yeah. They just unfortunately kind of killed this, Charlene's character off very soon. Like she should have made it to New York.
Yeah, agreed.
I didn't mind the biology project so much.
Like I don't know how she had time to do all that.
That's a lot of art. Yeah. That's a lot of body art. Yeah. But she.
And how do you do it like looking down as well?
And I think her personality is so different from this character. Like she's actually kind of shy. Like she's very, like Susan Jennifer Sullivan, I think, was also like a very unassuming girl, but they like just have that certain look that they can play the bitchy blonde.
It's probably fun to play, I'm sure.
I was a little nervous about, some of the.
She still has that Canadian thing you can hear, a boot.
Yeah.
Rob Hedden wanted to make me feel comfortable, so he was stripped down.
And there's Rob Hedden's outtake of his ass hanging out, like because she was so nervous about the nudity. Rob took his pants off and got in the shower.
That's actually great for a director to do.
Not only did I had a shirt and a vest.
And we talked about the outfits, and horrible. She said baggy, horrible pants.
Oh.
Friday the 13th.
Yep.
So many
she talks about this is a section about styles and camcorders. Technology you can never keep up with technology in movies. It's just you can't.
And I think when you try to be futuristic, it makes it even worse.
It does, right?
Except for Star Trek.
Okay, and
Yeah.
also
Everything in Star Trek, like DVDs,
as much
everything.
as I
they called it.
Blade Runner up is one of the best, and it is. It's still there's like the monitors that are goofy and those sort of like CTRs and.
Well, like anytime I see a square TV now, you know it's an old movie because everything's a rectangle. Right. So.
And I thought, well, okay, let's figure out a way to kill him.
But I think I think one of the missed opportunities. I don't think it was Rob's fault. I just think they didn't have the money to do it. Is to get him in Madison Square Garden, to get Jason in the Statue of Liberty, and all the things you would have wanted to see in a Jason Takes Manhattan movie. And this is where he teleports. I don't know how he got that ability all of a sudden.
Well, when I first saw it, I thought, well, maybe because she's fucked up, she's not seeing things right. But then he keeps teleporting the rest of the movie. So,
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can't break your fall. Not easy.
Again, I think it's almost like goes hand in hand with what you said earlier, Peter, which is just the whole like. That each director kind of brought his own different vision of what Jason is and what he can do. Yeah. And apparently, now Toxic Waste has has powers that go beyond human knowledge. Jeff Katz says it in such a funny way at the end.
Yeah. Well, too, you're also dealing with something that's, at this point, is ridiculous. How can this person even be alive? Like, he's a zombie. I mean, you're not in the realm of reality.
Right.
Like, the thing about the first four, technically they are plausible. Like, nothing happens in the movie that couldn't technically happen in real life. But this stuff can't happen. I mean, Jason couldn't possibly.
Well, he could. And he did.
Yes.
But I think that's part of the, I think that's just still part of the fun audience participation sort of thing of these movies. This is the one time in the series where people, I remember, were cheering Jason on because he was doing the right thing. He was saving the girl from the rapist.
True.
And the drug giving, I mean, I hate to say, but Rennie needed to go for a test after this movie because they used a, potentially infected syringe on him.
Let's put a sauna on the ship. I actually put the Panaflex on my back to shoot that sequence of the hot coals.
And I think this was a reshoot because that's why they had the towel over the actor's face because it was a different actor.
I'll never forget
that's the reason.
I think this was the first one, wasn't it? Where I think Rob Hedden said they really did feel the influence in Nightmare on Elm Street. There was this pressure. Okay, you gotta start adding.
Yep. Yeah, they had to add more like a fantastic element. They were trying to push it in that a little bit of. That's why he comes through the mirror.
Yeah.
And, the sort of goofy kind of effects that didn't really work out very well. But
and two, I think Aliens was also becoming an influence on a lot of these movies. Like there's more of an action, like the pacing, and they're running around the ship, and a lot more death and physical stuff.
I don't know what the budget was for this one, but I think it couldn't have been more than it was $5 million. It was $5 million.
Yeah, we went over budget though, so there was close to $5 million.
One of the takes that's in the
I don't know. You'd think for $5 million they could have gotten a little more production out of New York.
Yeah, I think because they went over there with this stuff. So I don't know. Yeah.
The boat was closer.
They spent a lot of money redoing stuff in Vancouver.
Right. And I just and the Vancouver stuff to me, and I'm sure a lot of fans agree, just you never really believe those were those back streets of New York. The alleys were a little too wide, and the streets just didn't match up.
Well, you can just kind of tell. I remember when he lands in New York, and you're like, okay, now they've been walking in an alley for 15 minutes.
Right.
You just know, okay, well, obviously they're fudging, they're covering.
Well, how also, this is the thing we bring up all the time in the show, in all of our shows, is how did he get to New York?
He swam.
How did he get there? Was he attached to the bottom of the boat?
Wasn't there always a controversy that you could see him holding onto the boat?
Yeah. Somebody said you could see him hanging onto the boat of the rowboat.
I want to know how VC Dupree was underwater the whole time. Remember, like they go into the rowboat,
right?
And he just pops out of the water. I'm like, where has he been for the last 20 minutes?
Swimming around the ship, doing the backstroke.
Having Jason rise up out of the water into the harbor in New York.
So I do remember.
I just have to laugh at this. I know when Corey Feldman was doing the narration for this particular installment, he was a little bit like, "Really? Am I really having to talk about this?"
Yep.
My death scene.
Well, I do remember when he finally actually gets to real New York, the audience came alive.
Right.
It only lasted for a couple minutes.
Yeah,
but even the diner scene was still.
The diner scene was funny, and the subway had a few moments.
And then I was like, okay. We know we're not in New York.
Though, and Jeff Katz, again, I keep giving shout out to Jeff Katz, but he talks about, later in this segment, about the marketing behind that. I mean, that trailer was a home run, as was the I Heart New York poster, which was ultimately became the subject of a huge lawsuit between the Tourism Board of New York and Paramount. Paramount ended up pulling the poster.
Yep.
But,
and the MPAA also changed the poster too.
Right, and I actually gave you, because I worked for the MPAA, I gave you the original rejected poster,
with
which
the stamp. I mean,
which they gave me.
Stamp.
Yeah, I had the
was
stamp
awesome.
of it. Yeah, we actually show it later.
Oh, good.
But the reason I have it is because I worked for the MPAA, and they just kind of let me have, you know, the rejected version. Which was just like a mock-up at the time. It wasn't like a finished poster. It just had kind of like a temporary like a Xerox title on it. And I think the release date was originally like July 28th or something like that, as opposed to August. I think it came out in August.
Yeah, it did. A week or 2 weeks before Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
Mm-hmm. They were probably trying to beat it.
Yeah.
Don't pause and say, take
I love Jeff Katz in this. It's hilarious.
He's going to knock your head off into a dumpster.
My friend Brett swears that this is the greatest Friday the 13th ever made.
Really?
Because of Joyce's death.
Because of his?
Because of Joyce? Yeah, he doesn't care about anything else. He's like, a dude gets his head punched off by Jason.
It's clever.
End of story.
People responded to it. It definitely was a crowd pleaser.
Peter Mark Richmond, best known for his roles in episodes of The Twilight Zone and Dynasty, being killed by Jason was hardly the high point of his acting career.
See, tell the story.
Yeah,
being in the theater and he was at the early screening. You hear the reporter or something behind going, "What would he want to be doing in a movie like this?"
Oh, I know. He didn't say that. That's crazy. There was a nasty rat at the top of that thing, too. Ugh. Now, if that's toxic waste, how come he didn't come back to life or turn into a kid?
He'd be melted, wouldn't he? I don't know.
Yeah, but when you throw it on Jason, it turns him into a little boy.
Are there really vats of toxic waste just
sitting
in the
around New York, I guess. I didn't realize that New York had a building that looked like that one in Vancouver.
It does.
That's not Manhattan. That's Rob's sister?
Peggy
Or wife? Okay, yeah. Steve Merkovich, who was the editor. His
Yeah,
son,
his son,
I love this line. He says, "Not since Rumble in the Bronx has a less accurate depiction of New York ever been presented." But you know, they at least got their day in New York. I think when they were shooting, I think they only got a day or two, right, Peter, in New York?
One night.
One night.
Yeah. I think they did some pickups that they went into exterior shots like Statue of Liberty stuff with no actors in it.
Right.
But this is one night.
But I know Kane talks about how he was, you know, really like a rock star that night when he came out of that trailer dressed as Jason in the middle of Times Square. I think people went pretty crazy.
But yeah, most Jensen said it and Rob had, and it was like one of the best moments in their career. I mean, you know, you're in a crane shot in New York and all these people. It was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting about the year 1989 when this came out is it was kind of the death knell, so to speak, of the slasher era. Like Nightmare on Elm Street 5 came out, this came out, and Halloween 5 came out, and after that, like a lot of this, it felt like I remember even feeling like maybe I'm too old for this stuff now. Like the generation that grew up in like 80, 81, started to be in their 20s and stuff, and it seemed like, you know, after this we had the Final Freddy, after this Paramount dropped the series, and after this Halloween then ended up going to Miramax. Like, so it definitely changed. Like, this is definitely
the end of that road. Yeah, totally. Well, also, I think this is also the jump the shark kind of thing. Like, wow, if you have to go down to this road, it's you're bankrupt creatively a little bit. I mean, I think they were pushing it to a place where, like, well, what can we do? I mean, this is like an example of this kind of like deleted scene with like goofy like Jason in the mouth of Jason and the little boy inside of the big, you know, Jason's mouth. I mean,
you're trying to bring it so far away from what Friday the 13th was too.
Right.
Because if you try to make it fantastical like Nightmare on Elm Street, you're not becoming
right. I mean, I hate to say, even their makeup is so ridiculous. Like, just he's not like, wow. Did they even attempt to try to make him look like the character that we'd seen in all these other movies?
Yeah.
I mean, compare that to Beekler's makeup. There's just it's like not even in the same universe.
But, you know, again, like, you know, everyone tried to make a good movie, and you do the best you can, and wow. And
again, this still was going on. I was, you know, like I said, I was right in the middle of that fight, and here, you know, here's the post. That was the poster that I gave you. This is the actual which had the blood on it, and they don't approve blood on posters, and you know, it was, you know, and then New York got involved. The state of New York got involved.
That was a trademark.
They were, it's a trademark.
Sure, it did.
So they were, you know, it got contentious. It got really like, you know, a heated thing. But I think if at the end of the day, it was good for publicity for this movie. The whole thing was a great publicity stunt.
They'd probably embrace it now, but
yeah, right. They would. I still don't know where this newscast came from, but it's cool.
As far as capitalizing on being in New York City, I think another way that they did that was really kind of brilliant was the trailer.
Oh yeah, this trailer is just genius.
Oh yeah, the audience loved it. I remember I'd see it in front of movies. Like, oh man,
and people
fun.
didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
You really didn't. You thought it was like,
something else.
Sleepless in Seattle kind of a, whatever.
Texas Chainsaw 3 kind of ripped off the trailer for this.
For this one.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that guy's voice.
Yeah.
Was that Percy?
Yeah, Percy.
It'll come to us.
Yeah. He was in a lot of movies.
Oh, Jaws.
He did the.
Yeah. I think he passed away, but he had a great, voice.
I remember this too.
Yep.
We could argue too, like, this is when Jason, how can this character be scary when he's starting to show up in Arsenio Hall?
Right.
And I think that around this time, didn't they MTV gave Jason the MTV Movie
the
Award
movie award, right,
for
yep.
the Legend Award or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's still, we talked about this, and his name was Jason, but he still never got a star on the Walk of Fame. I don't know why Jason doesn't have a star.
We could petition for one. I
think so. I think it's one day. When it's like, Bride of Jason.
Yeah.
Son of Jason.
Well, he always mentioned like Abbott and Costello and Meet Frank and that kind of stuff. When it gets to that level.
Right. Well, I mean, even you and I saw the very rough cut of Freddy Jason when you and I first met, and we were kind of like, huh.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about the next one, but I remember saw like the early cut of Part 9 as well, and thinking sort of the same thing, like, wow, now we have body switching,
Yeah. So. Well, here too, this is the end of the reign for Frank.
Yeah.
He just the end of the road for him. He just was done, and this was the end of the road. He was ready to move on, and that's exactly what he did. And I'm telling you, I mean, until he did the interview with the book for you, and then he did this for us, he just didn't and doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just a part of his life. It's not that he's ashamed of it, but I think it's something he's definitely put to rest. And here, look at these stories. This is the kind of publicity he was dealing with. It's tough.
I can't keep on doing this.
So I think he had his reasons. I was always kind of saddened because of the fact he was so gracious to me and encouraging of my ambitions. So it was really to me it was a sad thing that he moved away from it. But at
a certain point, I guess you have to go.
Right,
yeah,
right. And I think, look, I mean, he was just like the rest of us, getting older and wanting to find other challenges. That's the letter he sent to me. So very nice. And again, the first letter, I should say. There were several, but
the fans are what made this movie.
But I think, and he really does have. I think he talks here about how much appreciation he does have for the fans and what this meant to him, because it did mean something. It wasn't just something he phoned in.
Yeah, it definitely was an end of an era. The 80s are over. And that was it.
Now Jason Goes to Hell. I have a soft spot for this one, I have to admit.
This is part 5.
I think I always root for the underdog. That's what it is.
All right. Well, it's good. These movies should have
somebody needs
have
to
a voice.
like it.
Yes.
Because here's the thing: someone out there, this probably is their favorite Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
And that's why we did our best to try to treat them equally.
Producer Sean S. Cunningham.
Yep. Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not going to say that every one of these gets equal screen time, but there's, ample screen time devoted to every movie on this documentary. I mean, that's why it's as long as it is. I don't know how many hours we've been here, you guys. 6? I don't know. I've lost track of time. But, and there's Noel Cunningham, that's Sean's son, and he was in the first movie. He was one of the campers, like sleeping in the beds. Yep.
He was on set.
He told a story about the first movie about Tom Savini coming in like this gorilla suit during when they were having lunch. Like in one of the cabins, and he just came in with this like ape suit, and just like tore the place apart.
And started shooting people with big squib guns. Yep. Someone was screaming, running out of the tent. They used to play a lot of jokes like that.
It's like meatballs.
Yeah. Me too. He talked about, I remember, just a sense of innocence back then. Like, Sean would have barbecues and people would come.
Yep.
And, Steve Miner would be there. And it was a real family atmosphere. And I guess one of the cool things about Part 9 is that all kind of came back. Sean came back.
Right.
He brought back Barry Moss, the casting director. So there was an attempt to. I think Adam Marcus talked a lot about. He really wanted to create a kind of commune atmosphere and make it really fun. So I think everyone had a lot of fun making this movie. That's for sure.
Right. And he was so young.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, to be given that kind of a.
There they are.
Yeah.
It was a fun little kind of horror comedy.
I think one of the things I like about this film is just. They talk about, they try to do something different. Nowadays, everything's just so cookie cutter, and even before that, like all the Saw films, they're all the same. This one, he at least wanted to do something different.
Well, Sean really didn't pay much attention to the series after the original one, really. And 2, maybe a little bit. He was involved in, he helped Steve as needed. But after that, he was just gone from the whole thing. He had no association other than, financially in any of it. But with this one, I think he just wanted to do his own thing again and not really pay attention to what had come before, although he knew Kane Hodder from, I think he had worked with him on the House movies as a stuntman, so it was kind of a no-brainer to bring Kane back. But other than that, they even didn't, Sean was kind of like, get that hockey mask out of the movie, because that had nothing to do with the Friday the 13th he had made. So, but, they kind of had to find a middle ground somehow.
And Sean told me that he felt he didn't really understand the movies because he wasn't following them, so he wanted to get someone young and excited and someone like Adam Marcus who loved the franchise to take over, and he was just going to trust them to
love the franchise. They didn't even spell Voorhees right. I like Adam a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I know. He did the new Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, he did.
He co-wrote.
Yeah.
I know, Dan, we've joked about possibly lower thirding Kane Hodder in this as Jason Voorhees with 1 O.
Oh, yeah.
Right, we kind of
wink,
we couldn't do that to him, though.
Well, how's he listed in the credits? Is he just Jason in the credits? I honestly don't
remember, but I just know there's that, like, outside the Voorhees house, it's with
the
1
sign,
O.
Yeah.
Well, the actual script is littered.
And then the script, too, right.
With Voorhees with 1 O.
Yep. So we can't blame the art department entirely. They were going off the script.
Yeah.
Somebody needed to point that out.
I didn't have a clue.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I mean,
I think I do think I like the fact
that
it John LeMay in it. It made me want to see the movie because I did know the show, I did know the series. I was like, I was actually, part of me thought they were crossing the TV series into the movies at this point. So it did make me a little interested. Barry Moss said he didn't want to cast him for that reason, but Adam wanted him. I liked him in the movie, actually.
Yeah, I did too, actually.
Yeah. I think Carrie Keegan was a good heroine.
The idea and the essence of
yeah, I mean, I remember it's a true story, when I was a student at USC in '92, they used to hand out those tickets for movie screenings, and so I was a film student, so we lied, and I think I said I was an engineering student, but anyway, because you're not allowed to go to the screenings, they want average people who are not in the movie business. Yep. And it turned out to be part 9, so we got to see the early cut before the reshoots, before the camera being split the minute was in it. And I remember there's no credits even. It was like it would just pan away to black, and they had some of the music. And,
oh wow!
And I remember after the opening, when Creighton Duke showed up, and going, "What the fuck is this movie gonna be?" Like, it was completely bewildering. So I guess they accomplished. Yeah, because I mean, I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't know what the story was, and so it was kind of a thing. Part of me was like, "Oh, cool, it's something new." Another part was like, "Well, this isn't Friday the 13th anymore," So I think that's a double-edged sword with doing something totally new.
Yeah.
Is you alienate the fan base. At the same time, you don't want to see the same movie 5,000 times either.
Right.
So.
Right. I have to point out, and Luke, you want to point this out, I'm sure, was that in that clip that you just saw of The Hidden, there was Ted White. Was like a cop or something getting
Ted
shot?
White was one of the cops getting shot.
Yeah.
I just watched a movie called Witchboard 2 that she was the villain in.
Julie Michaels. She's great. Oh my god, she's hilarious. She's like tons of fun.
I like the opening a lot. Like when he's stalking her, that was pretty.
This
good.
is like they kind of summed up all Friday the 13th in like a cool little opening, kind of like a little teaser.
And we put every cliche that had ever been in any of the Friday the 13th movies within
and well done.
5-minute section.
You'll see the mirror closed, and he's not there.
Earlier we talked about how Sean wanted that hockey mask off, but this one kind of goes back to the original where it's kind of like the whole family thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. A little too much. It's almost like a soap opera at this point. It's how many generations.
Original Verizon, like the Aaron Gray character was dating the cop, and there's another character that's not even in this cut.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they re-edited a lot and changed a lot of stuff. So.
I really like Kane. He took the part so seriously.
I wish we'd mentioned the fact that they had done House. House, which was also directed by Steve Miner, right?
Yeah.
And that Kane was one of the, it was a stunt coordinator, I believe, on House. Or House 2, The Second Story.
Well, there's a connection because...
I don't know that they did House 2, The Second Story together. I just like saying that title.
Yeah. Well, then they did House 3, which became the horror show.
Yes.
And Jim Isaac took over directing that. He went on to direct Jason X.
Yes,
so
that's
there's
right.
a whole
Right.
connection.
Yeah, it all kind of goes full circle in all of these. And, you mentioned the thing earlier about Sean, like that sort of family atmosphere when everybody would go over to his house for barbecues, but he's still like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I get invited up to his house for, new media night. Dan, it's new media night. Come over, I mean, I'm supposed to go there this week and watch something. But he's like, and he always has to order the food in, and it's never anything fancy. It's just kind of like everybody just kind of piles up in the living room and
I remember
kind of,
a big thrill was when we did the book. He was so wonderful. He offered to sign some copies of the book, and so we went to his house. Remember?
Yeah, of course.
We were in his living room. He's just signing away books, and he was great.
And I think Jeff Garrett, who's our silent but very appreciated partner, triumvirate of this group here.
He's our Phil Scuderi.
He's our Phil Scuderi, the silent, but powerful partner of this group who's never heard from. Like he's an incredibly, sweet, kind, gracious guy, but he just doesn't come out and do this kind of stuff. But so very few people know who Jeff is. But he works for J.J. Abrams now. He's big time. But Jeff, kind of coerced Sean into signing like 500 books.
I think he thought he was going to sign like 10.
Right, and there was like box after box, like truckloads of books coming into his house. He just did it. I had pictures of you guys signing that day. I
remember that.
Yeah.
And Dean Lorey's one of the corners here.
Right, yeah, Dean Lorey, who was huge on television, Arrested Development, and what was the other show?
I know, what was, I can't remember.
Oh, it's going to come up. But anyway, it's been a lot of hours. But yeah, Dean's, with the mango-sized turd. Isn't that what he said?
I love that. He was a character too.
Oh yeah, and he came to the party. He came to the launch. Yeah. We tried to get him for this as well. I don't remember what the reason was that he gave or his managers gave for not doing it, but he wasn't.
I remember the weird thing was up for it. He actually lives 4 blocks from me.
Really?
Yeah.
Still?
Back then when I did interview him for the book.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
Knock on his door and see.
Yeah, I should walk over.
It's so funny living in Los Angeles. It sounds kind of like douchebaggy.
Yeah,
you're
I
like,
know.
my neighbor is so and so.
But
it's kind of true. John Beekler lives up the street from me. I mean, these people have to live somewhere.
I don't say it to be cool. I just mean like it's amazing.
No, I know,
oh my god, I was this
but
kid.
People will listen to that.
Yeah.
No,
I remember being like 10 watching these movies. If you would have told me that I would have lived 3 blocks away from someone, I'd be like, oh my god.
Right. Or that you'd meet Amy
Steele.
Yeah,
I know. Oh yeah.
Any of this stuff.
I would cry.
And didn't you and I have always over the years talked about how when we were kids we thought they were all millionaires.
Yes, I did. Oh my god, they must be rich.
I mean, let's face it. Some people married better than others.
It's
However, I'd say the majority of these people are like working class folk to this day.
Yeah.
I know like Elizabeth Caton, who's in Part 7. She works for David Horowitz. Like the consumer advocate guy.
Yeah.
That was the idea behind it.
A lot of people are teachers. A lot of people have just gotten out of the business.
Some
a lot of people,
behind the scenes,
or still work. Work in different ways.
Well, like now, Joseph Garrity, who's a production designer on 6, he's a teacher at UCLA.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. Teaches classes.
I know. Jumping over to Nightmare, Heather Langenkamp, does like special effects from her husband.
Well, her husband is an Oscar-winning, absolutely. Dave Anderson is Heather's husband, and in fact, the whole teaser for Never Sleep Again was shot at his shop. And this is Brooke. This is baby Stephanie, who you introduced me to at the party.
That's right.
You walked up to me and go, "This is baby Stephanie."
Well, it was great because then she got to talk to Carrie Keegan because Carrie Keegan told me a joke in the book.
Yeah.
About how she always wondered about this poor baby is probably traumatized for life.
Right.
Because she was in this movie and then she got to meet her.
And there she is. We actually talk about that at the very end of the show. We talk about that.
Oh,
we show the photos.
Oh, good.
I think you or I took those photos.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
That was okay. I'm sorry, but totally not off topic, but onto a different area of this. But that book launch we had up at Universal City that year in 2005 was like that was the deal of the century. For like $50, you got the signed book from like 200 people. You got to see Friday the 13th on the big screen, and you got free alcohol at a free party.
Yeah.
If anybody missed that party, you really missed out on a night.
I mean, it's too bad we couldn't sell more tickets. I think we had a limit, wasn't it?
We had to stop selling. Yeah. We also did run out of booze. Yeah. To be fair.
But that's okay. I just remember it was this huge orchestrated thing where like the books had to be signed and taken away or something, and I had to go to the screen.
Yeah, you were at the screening. You had to do a Q&A. And Jeff and I were like manning the whole fort of having all the photos. I mean, the book signed. And this is Michael Silver, who we interviewed, who was the boyfriend of Michelle Clooney when they shot this, and they had just broken up, and they had to do this sex scene.
Yeah, and she of course went on to do Queer as Folk.
Yep, and we talk about that here. And but Luke, you had just mentioned he's got a famous sister.
Yeah, his sister's actually a screenwriter. She wrote Hand That Rocks the Cradle, and also it's like her and her husband they wrote Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think they're doing the sequel. And they're currently writing Jurassic Park 4 as well.
Oh, shit.
That's pretty
Cool.
huge.
Yeah.
He's a really cool guy, and you know, I think it's. I mean, how awkward would it be that you just broke up with someone and now you got to go and do this scene?
Yeah. You show up on the first day. Oh, look.
Right.
Yeah.
And this was a reshoot. I mean, this was all like after the
Yeah,
fact.
this
probably
wasn't
wasn't in the version.
No,
you
not at
saw,
all.
Right?
So I remember they gave us audience cards. We had a Q&A afterward. Adam Marcus was in the back. I knew he wasn't at the time.
Yeah.
And they asked, a lot of us raised our hand and said, we want more stocking. There's not enough of that. So
right.
That's definitely what.
Yeah. So they went to like the vintage Friday the 13th kind of stuff.
But in a funny way, though. So.
Right. The condom thing, I guess, got a huge reaction.
Yeah,
when they stepped on the condom or they threw it out.
So she had to do this huge.
You know, this film gets a lot of shit, but I think that's one of the best kills out of the entire franchise.
It's really bloody and nasty, yeah. But Michelle won't talk about this at all. She really has an aversion to the... I don't know if she's ashamed of the fact she did the movie. I'm not even sure what the actual reason is, but I mean...
She said she feels too violent.
Yeah, and she's really become like an advocate for like human rights, and you know, I think Queer as Folk was like a change of life for her. I think the fact that she played that role and that show was sort of so well regarded, I think she became, you know, invested in a different way. I'm not criticizing her for not doing it, although I am, but I think, you know, she has her other, you know, more, you know, she has her reasons for not, you know, wanting to.
And let's face it, this is completely gratuitous. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, she didn't have a character so much. She was just kind of, you know, killed and.
Yeah. Torso cut in half.
That's a great effect.
And it had a little mechanism in it so that it could sort of flower open.
But I wish she had talked about it. It would have been fun to interview her.
Because sometimes, you know, I want to say this is your chance to talk about, you know, why this is a problem. Like,
right, or why you wished you hadn't, or, you know, I mean, a lot of, you have to understand, too, a lot of these actors are just young, like, they're new in town. They were in an acting class together. I think, I want to say, I forgot, he told us in the interview, I don't know if it made the show, but he and Michelle were in an acting class that was taught by, it might have been Adam. Not Adam.
Adam Marcus?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did teach acting.
So maybe that's what it was, and that's how he recruited them for the movie. So they just, you know, it was a couple days' work, and, you know, when you're a young actor, you take the work you can get.
Because of that. You know, the thing about Adam Marcus was he was really behind, 100% behind shooting every gag to...
Yeah, there was a lot of crazy effects.
Yeah.
I mean, it was...
Oh, God.
And this is the one where Rick Canby was, you know, they really were the effects house. I mean, we've heard from Greg Nicotero earlier in the show where he really wasn't involved, but because he is such sort of a well-known, you know, he's obviously, you know, incredibly involved in The Walking Dead, one of the producers, and has directed a couple episodes of that show, and, you know, incredibly well-regarded, Oscar-winning, you know, effects artist. But so we thought it was appropriate that he would talk about some of the effects in the earlier movies as well.
Yeah, I know we don't talk about it in here, but at the time they were also doing Army of Darkness. So that's why we have the Necronomicon, we have the dagger,
right,
from Evil Dead,
homoerotic shaving,
and homoerotic shaving.
Now covering. I do. One of the things I do miss from his name was Jason was Steve Barton of Dread Central, who's one of my dear friends, just talking repeatedly about homoerotic shaving, and to hear Steve Barton say that like on a loop is hilarious. But unlike that show, we really opted on this one, like Never Sleep Again, to only interview people who were directly involved with the series, even if they weren't involved in every episode. Like Jeff Katz wasn't involved in every episode. He was still involved in the franchise, so it was important to us to only make it and give screen time to the people who were involved. Not, you know, as much as I love all those guys, and Stacey Wilson and Brad Miska and Ryan Turek and Steve, obviously, and they did a lot of commentary on. His name was Jason, but this was just different. We just wanted this one to be Friday the 13th centric.
I just loved watching Rusty work.
Erin Gray reps a lot of actors now and puts them, you know, she puts them in shows and conventions, and, you know, she's very active in that part of the business now. Rusty Schwimmer's hilarious.
Yeah, they're both hilarious.
You know, remember, Peter, when we went to Billy Butler's house from Part 7 to get his photos one day, and then his downstairs neighbor was Leslie Jordan. Am I right?
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And Leslie Jordan wouldn't do this either. You know, he
was
kind of
hilarious when I talked to him.
Yeah, he didn't want to do this. I don't know why.
Now, Dan, didn't you say that their son was actually like the set security in this?
Not son, but the guy who played their son.
Yeah.
I think his name is Adam Cranner. But he was just like the set security guy, and they thought he was so funny. This guy.
Oh, yeah.
He was just like a security guard on the set, but they thought he was so entertaining. I think that's why they put him in the movie. And then we have to give a shout, you know, Mark and Brian, who were like really famous radio hosts here in Los Angeles at that time, and still are around. There they are.
Retired, yeah.
Did they retire?
Just this year, yeah.
But they, they had a cameo in this. In fact, there was a fan poster, maybe it was even a real poster, where they actually featured Mark and Brian.
Well, they were actually on the radio talking about how they love Friday the 13th, and Adam Marcus called them and said...
Is that why?
And he said, we want to be in the movie, and it was all in the air.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, they should have called Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no problem. Well, back then, Hugh Jackman didn't...
Yeah, he wasn't really around.
Yeah.
He hadn't popped.
I don't think so, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But all this, Aaron still to this day is like, mortified by the scene that, they shot later. Like, this whole movie was kind of made in post.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's the whole 22 frames a second thing. Did you talk to Sean?
Oh, we didn't talk about that, but yeah, they shot this at a different frame rate.
Yeah, so basically it made everything go faster. So, like, you shot it at 22 frames a second, projected at 24 frames a second, and then with a voice thing, you could affect people's voices so they don't sound like chipmunks, but it made the movie move faster. So suddenly, a 90-minute movie becomes a 60 or 80-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, not only was it disjointed, but it was too short. So they had to shoot extra stuff, and apparently it was a disaster or a nightmare.
Yeah, the frame change, the frame rate thing was a big deal.
Yeah. So.
I mean, again, it'd be fun if on this commentary we were able to get Adam to come in and talk about the movie as well with us. Just because he brings so many more other insights. Yeah. But just from all the research we've done, I mean, I think nobody other than you and me and now and Luke as well, and Andrew if he was here. Andrew's at Comic-Con as we speak, so unfortunately he can't be here to join us. But
you just stated when the commentary was.
I know. It's all right. Whatever.
Jason.
But.
The end of the film. And by the way, you might not know this. I'm Jason. All of Jason's vocals, that's me.
But the fact that Jason had vocals, wasn't he like...
Yeah. I don't remember... I haven't seen it in a long... I'll be honest, I don't watch this one very often.
Yeah.
Well,
you took a sabbatical off the franchise. I mean, really, the end when the book ended, you needed a break from all of this stuff. And
well, sometimes when you do something so much, I can't watch the films anymore as films.
Well, let me tell you,
they deconstruct it completely.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
I think David
you really lose objectivity, I guess, is what it is. I mean, I don't have any now. I mean, we've been working on this show for a year and a half, nonstop.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did. I'm proud of what we've done here, but I think after this, I've got to move away from this for a bit.
Well, too, you run out of things. It becomes a different. Now it's so long ago. Like when I went with Luke when we saw the Part 2 screening. That was the first time because the movie was like 30 years old by that point. I remember looking and going, "Wow, this is really another era. Like this is. It's not just like nostalgia for 10 years ago or high school. It's like this is like a completely different generation. Like I am. Like,
well, also when you think about what would have been going on in those people's lives at the time. I mean, this is like
Well, I think about it like in 1980. That's like being in 1980 and watching a movie from 1950.
I hate to say, but
you're right. It's a huge change. It's totally different.
And I talk to younger people who, Luke's age and younger, who are, who watch these movies and I appreciate them. And it's hard for me because when I look at when we were growing up and Psycho seemed like such an old movie to us.
Yeah.
I wonder if, from your point of view, is that what you see when you look at these movies?
Not really, especially, I mean...
Maybe because they're in color.
Well, also, I mean, I think another reason why I like Jason Goes to Hell was this was the first one that I was aware of.
Okay.
It was just like your Halloween.
Yeah.
It was the first time I was aware of. I mean, when this came out, I was 7 years old.
Wow.
So it was like, oh my god, there's a Jason movie out, so I have that nostalgia.
I was in college. I'm crying right now.
I was too.
Another thing I just kind of like about it was honestly the commentary that Adam Marcus and Dean Lorey did for the DVD.
Yeah.
Because they don't apologize for the film. They still stick with it. But they honestly say, like, we completely understand why people hate this film.
Right.
But we had nothing but the best intentions with it.
Well, sometimes, the people that hate Friday the 13th end up liking these films because they are so different.
Yeah.
All Jason all the time.
Jason has to
I did like the 2-for-1 Jason burger
sale.
Yeah,
that was cute.
It's possible that the concept.
But I definitely think they, we're pushing it into a different realm, and I just, whether it worked, didn't work, it's gonna like all of these movies are sort of up to interpretation.
It's interesting too. They didn't use teenagers, as all adult characters.
That's right.
Which is unusual.
My response that has always been, you know what? There are 7 of those movies you can rent. You can see a whole lot of Jason the Hockey Mask.
You have to deliver a certain.
That shirt, wow.
Yeah, that's quite a shirt, Sean.
Consistent with the ones that preceded.
Dating this movie.
Better be consistent.
That's cool.
Yeah, some great art. I think Crow did that design.
Say, I've got an idea. let's have Jason do.
But I do
body
think,
swapping.
again, I think the body swapping and the whole kind of the hidden thing. I think Adam says he didn't see the hidden, but I don't know how you wouldn't have seen the hidden.
Yeah, or wouldn't known of it. It's a new line movie as well.
Yeah. But it really was a departure, to say the least.
Well, this is interesting contrast between this, the mythology they kind of create in this, versus the mythology Tom McLaughlin did in 6, where some people feel like this went too far and wacky.
Right.
So, they both attempted the same thing, and one was better received than the other.
Right. Although 6 wasn't a hit by any stretch of the imagination.
But I mean, fans don't, aren't as negative, maybe as negative. Like,
right.
Some people are like, "What's this body?" There was more of an, I think there's more of an angriness.
Yep.
Again, or anger.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But they tried something different.
Yeah.
And I think you got to commend them for that. And I think Adam does have a lot of respect for the fans.
Absolutely. Jason in space.
Evil gets an upgrade.
Or does it?
It's a good tagline.
Yeah.
Following the crowd pleasing
About all I'll give them. No, that's me.
What?
I said that's all I'll give them. It's a good tagline. No. Again, I think it's important to point out that a lot, all of these movies, for good, bad, or ugly, they have their fan base, and you have to kind of respect that, and kind of give each one its due.
I mean, for me, one of the questions is some people say you can make a good movie out of anything, and then sometimes I think, are there just some concepts that just are never going to work?
Yeah.
Like Leprechaun in space.
Right.
Jason,
we talk about that coming up.
Some people are just I don't care I can't do Jason in space. I just can't do it.
Right.
That's how I feel.
It was funny. I just met Jeff Garrett, who's I would mention a few minutes ago. Our partner in the book, and involved in all this. He worked for Crystal Lake Entertainment when we met him, and he was very much involved in Jason X and was up there in Toronto when they were filming. And I remember one of the first conversations I ever had was, I think they were just about to shoot the movie, and he said, I said, why are you doing that movie? Why would you possibly put Jason in space? It's ridiculous. And what do you say? I mean, you're a hired hand on a film, and you go with what you're given. Jim Isaac just passed away too, sadly. It's amazing how in the past couple of years, so many people from this franchise have passed on, and we're really blessed and lucky that we got to meet so many of the people before they passed on. But he was a very nice man.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed him. It was the first time he talked about the movie since. He said it took him 3 or 4 years to deal with the fallout.
Right.
And then he talked. That was the first interview I think he did about it. He really struggled and tried to make the best movie he could. And there's a lot of decisions he reflected on. That he felt like he could have made differently.
Yeah.
So I think it was really hard for him, but.
Sometimes it's also that battle of, wanting to keep your job because you've got a lot of studio suits that are just watching your every move. And also, it's picking and choosing your battles. And I think,
Like Rob Hedden said too, and he's like, maybe if I had more experience or I had more power, I would have said, hey, you know what, I'm not doing a movie about Jason in Manhattan when he's not in Manhattan.
Right.
And Jim Isaac said to me, dealing with Sean, there's time, it's exactly that. He's like, okay, I'll give up on this battle because I want to win this other battle.
Yeah. Yep.
Because originally Jim Isaac's idea was Jason in the snow. And he says he wished maybe he would have fought for that idea, and he wasn't all that jazzed about space at the beginning. So.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how they ultimately after, and I think Noel and Todd Farmer and probably Jim sat down and just started brainstorming ideas for what they could do, but I don't know how they settled on this one, frankly.
I remember Todd said they started with every idea. Todd said he liked the idea of Jason in Manhattan if Jason actually would have been in Manhattan, taking him somewhere else. He thought about Jason with street gangs, literally Jason on a drag strip, and then Jim's like, how about the snow? He said it'd be great to have imagery of, blood against snow and that kind of thing. And then Todd said he loved aliens, and so did Noel, and so and first Sean was like, I don't like Jason in space, and then they came up with and they suddenly just all were like, okay, we'll do it.
And I know the biggest champion that they had at the time was Michael DeLuca at New Line, who was, his career was on fire at the point, and then abruptly came to an end around the time they were delivering this movie, or at least his career at New Line. I shouldn't say that because he's still a huge producer.
Yeah.
He produced,
well, there was all that drama. Yeah, there was some things that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
It kind of implies that.
Well publicized.
Yeah. But he,
Google it.
He was, he would Google that, and he was he was kind of the golden boy at New Line for a lot of years, and then that came to an abrupt end, and then here was this movie that he was really, and one of the things you learn in the movie industry, when you lose the champion of that movie at a studio, your movie's pretty much dead. it's dead in the water. So the fact that this one was being made, and Sean went back to his negative pickup, right, kind of mode of making these movies.
And it was a lot more money. I think it was the budget of this was $12 million or something.
Okay.
It was, so we were talking a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, for a small Kreestahl Entertainment to put up $12 million, that's a huge risk to take.
Yeah.
So I think too, everyone was nervous. I remember Jim saying to me, we were worried that any moment Sean could just pull the plug. So you felt like I have to do what he says.
Then when DeLuca left,
and they named her character Adrian after Adrian King. I'm assuming. I think they did.
I
think they pretty much had to.
Yeah.
But when DeLuca left, I mean, that was why the film was kind of shelved for like a year, wasn't it?
Sat on the shelf for like 18 months or something.
Yeah, this is
but it was, again, it was the most like it hit like this is the point where the internet was in full gear and and torrenting it just kind of become the big thing and I think there was the era of Napster and all that, was going on. So I mean, the fans got a hold of our work print or something, and off it went. Digital realm took over, and fans were just, because and I've learned this when this infamous producer's cut of Halloween 6, which has still never been released. But it's one of the most pirated slasher movies out there because people they want what they can't have.
Yeah.
And this is one of those examples of a movie that they want and can have. I love that they did this MythBusters episode to see if you could freeze someone's face.
That's hilarious.
Did you know about that?
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Leave it to us.
I know. So many things. Well, just again shows you how much Friday the 13th has permeated, popular culture.
Totally.
But, in a way, this is kind of like a cursed movie. Like so many things went wrong. Like, the release date gets pushed and it gets pirated on the web, and then they get a horrible release date. And then like the whole thing with the fact, Harry Manfredini, had a great point, which was digital effects were so evolving so rapidly that 2 years on the shelf made the effects look way more dated really quickly. Because 2 years went by and suddenly, CGI taking leaps and bounds, so it looked cool in 1999.
Right.
2001.
And I think this was one of the first movies to use in camera. They were doing like
It was entirely done in post production. Like they scanned all the film into digital and did all the post production effects in digital.
Digitally. Yes. Right. One of the very first movies to do that.
So that would have been really cutting edge in '99, but like 2001.
Yeah.
We opened against Spider-Man.
So and that was that era of where things were moving by leaps and bounds very, very quickly. Still are, but back then for sure.
Yeah, and they lose Michael DeLuca. So
you look at some of these effects and how dated they look.
Yeah, look at
it's
that.
Just not up to today's standards.
This is just personal opinion, but it's kind of ironic that they spent more money on this, because they wanted to make it look like a high budget Friday the 13th. Yet in some ways, it looks like the most direct-to-video Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
which is kind of strange.
And they, today it would have missed that theatrical window completely. It would have ended up, straight to DVD, sadly.
Jason's coming at him.
But they brought Kane back, and this was the last, of the Kane.
Yep.
Jason movies. So
it does have the great virtual Crystal Lake sequence.
That is the best. Yeah, everybody remembers that, and I think that
Well, that might have been. I think Jim had said that was one of the few scenes where that captured the tone of what they were trying for the whole film.
He's going to grab you.
And
he's going to slam your
and there's
into an electronic.
This was another one of those scenes where I think they had to, come up with different set pieces to, ways to kill people that, they hadn't seen before. And I think a lot of the kills were just changed at the last minute.
Were.
Like, Yanni Gelman, who we'd seen a little earlier and talked about his death. Like, he was supposed to get split in half by the door and all these kind of other, much bigger designs they had.
Well, I know, too, Jim talked to me a little bit about, because some of the production problems, they didn't always get the coverage he wanted. Like, certain kills weren't as effective because they were so busy worrying about other stuff that he couldn't get the money shot, so to speak.
Right.
Like the scene where she gets sucked out of the airlock. You don't actually see her get sucked out of the airlock because they didn't have time to shoot it. So suddenly she just flies and then it's gone. So you missed, the big exciting moment.
It was pretty smooth.
Well, I think, they just they were attempting something completely different here.
Yeah, it's very ambitious.
Following the release of
Again, like I pointed out with Jason Goes to Hell, the when Michelle Clooney gets killed is one of the best kills of the entire series. I think when Christy Angus gets her head smashed, is one of the most memorable kills out of the series as well. Because love the film or hate it, I mean that's a cool kill.
Yeah, some fun moments. It has a sense of humor, like.
Well, you'd mentioned the virtual reality thing, kind of just, it's the moment of the movie that everybody remembers. If you're a fan of the series, you definitely remember that scene.
Well, too, I think Jeff Garrett actually mentioned, too, to me, there originally was like bigger chase between KM and Jason in a House of Mirrors kind of a thing. Like, I felt one thing that maybe lacked was there wasn't a cool big end battle. Like,
right.
I remember kind of...
And there was never really like a heroine. Like, is it KM or is it Lexa Doig's character? You never really have a, you know...
The frizzy-haired guy.
You don't really have a protagonist in this movie necessarily.
Also, I wasn't really sure who the kids were. Like, are they were supposed to be on an expedition from school?
Yeah, they're like almost like out like high school kind of, you know, like at-risk kids, I guess.
In interviewing these guys, did you guys ever ask them about the mask? Because that's a weird looking.
Which one? The Uber Jason
well,
mask
the actual hockey mask is different looking. It's much smaller and just kind of.
Well, it's different from in every movie.
Yeah, Stephen Dupree, I think that's how he pronounced his last name. I did interview him, and he talked about they wanted a big contrast between Uber Jason and the old Jason, you know. So they made him all ratty and gave him a different mask. He's supposed to be regenerated, so the mask would sort of fuse more to his head, and that would be a complete contrast to the much more metallic, inorganic Uber Jason. So you know, they wanted something different again, so they made the mask more angular on purpose. But yeah, it was too. I never quite understood how. So Jason's now regenerated. He's chained up somewhere. And so how I couldn't really understand how it connected to part 9 of the timeline. So had he been living in Crystal Lake for 100 years, or I don't know.
I think continuity is always never one of the strong points of this series.
I remember Todd Farmer told me specifically they didn't want to mess up the timeline for Freddy versus Jason. That's one of the reasons too they did Space. Is that way it could happen after Freddy versus Jason.
Right, and it can just kind of fit wherever it needed to fit in.
Yeah.
There's a scene in Jason X where the robot KM.
This is actually a funny gag.
Yeah.
So I'm shooting these interviews. Did you go to Canada? I mean, how did you get all these people?
No, actually, for some of these that you're like, this was a one we did for his name was Jason, which only I think in that show you saw maybe 30 seconds. Of this. But this we flew some of these people down from Canada. Wow. Yeah.
To this day, still.
And we didn't do a day in Vancouver.
Okay.
I know for this, like, Dan, you kind of talked about your big find was Jennifer Cook with 6.
Yeah.
Like, she's never talked about this.
Yeah.
I guess, who was, like, the one person that your guys were like, oh, we got him? Besides Jennifer Cook. Like, when you're doing his name, was Jason or just even the book?
God, there's such a long list. I'd have to go through and remember who. But, I mean, almost everybody we were excited.
Yeah.
You know, oh, she said yes. He said yes. And I have to say, you know, back, even as far as his name was Jason, Tommy Hudson, I mean, he went to the limit. I mean, I don't know anybody who could book a show like that guy. He lines them up and he brings them in. You know, he's very methodical. He's very precise about it, and he gets it done. And I just, you know, and Mikey Perez and Blake Regal, who I have never mentioned once during this commentary. Blake also worked. He actually replaced Jeff Garrett after Jeff had moved on from Crystal Lake Entertainment. But Blake worked for Sean for a brief period of time. And that's how we got to know Blake, and he got involved in His Name was Jason, and we brought him back for this show. It made perfect sense because he knows the subject matter so well, and he knows these people. So we brought him in as a production manager on this show as well. And he and Tommy and Mikey really, you know, had to just... And scheduling these people is not as easy as you think. It's just not.
I would say, like, you had a much bigger challenge than I had with the book, which is not only do you have to... you know, get them to commit to come down to location.
Yeah.
You have to book everyone in that location at certain times.
Right. Like, and it's literally like a factory at times. It's like we'll have Melanie Kinnaman in from 2 to 3. And then at 3:15, and you have to coordinate their arrival time, their makeup, their time to sign their releases, their time to sign autographs. Everything is regimented by the minute. And if they're late, you got to kind of make concessions from there. Well, and you only have, you know, it's like any studio. You rent it for a certain number of hours every day. If you go over to overtime, you got to pay more.
Well, like I didn't have that problem. Like I would go to someone for lunch. If they talked an hour and a half, oh well, I just had cassette tape. There was no costs involved.
Yeah.
So I never had to worry about time. There was none of that pressure. Oh God, I have someone coming at 2 or something. You know.
And I have to give again shout out to the team of transcriptionists that we brought onto this show. I mean, it was literally at one point an army of transcriptionists. I think Tommy brought in something like 35 transcriptionists.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about 150 interviews and an average of, you know, 30 to 40, some of them in a couple of hours, depending on how involved in the series they were.
You should be talking. That's cool because I didn't know that. You know, doing the book was different. Like how you actually take the transcripts and you kind of edit the transcript and then match the video. Like how you do that.
Yeah. It's all a lot of. I mean, I have to give Andrew really is the guy who who took that, and Benny too, assembled all of the usable material. And I had written outlines for all of these segments, you know, almost based on the book and the content that was in the book, but then kind of putting my own little pieces and taking it in a slightly different route, because what works in a book doesn't always work on film. So we just had to kind of, you know, weave our own narrative around it. But then Andrew and Benny took those pieces and just started finding every quote. And what I would have to do is go through the transcripts, and probably like you did with the book, and just give each quote that was usable a topic.
Yes.
You know, this is the virtual reality kill they're talking about, and then the editors would go in and just line those and assemble the show.
Well, also
so the original cut was probably you know, 16 hours long.
Oh, my original book outline was huge.
Yeah.
And
it's the same thing, and it's just whittling it down to the stuff that we're not only is it coherent in a story, but that kind of makes sense. You have to kind of find a narrative, and then after that, you got to find a way to set it up and places where the narration is going to help bridge some of this stuff. So that's the last
you have that
part.
challenge too. Like if I'm interviewing someone, they say, I can just delete that text. Where you can't do jump cuts, so you have to cut to something.
Well, you'd be surprised how much of that these guys do. I mean, Luke can speak to that.
But I mean,
stuff.
right when they're talking, like you can't cut in the middle of them speaking without cutting to something else.
No, but
right?
when you hear a lot of oohs and ahs, you'll see that's why we cut away to visuals.
But
Because we're able to cut them out.
But you still have to cut to a visual. So I'm saying, like, I don't have to cut to a visual.
Right, exactly.
I just hit
but
delete
that's
on my
more
computer.
challenge for Luke and Ben and Andrew to have to kind of
huge.
find ways to take those tiny pieces of ums and uhs and you know, where they skip a line, and you'd be surprised too if anybody really knew how much we had to do to kind of you know, you'd sometimes have to take Corey saying Friday the 13th from something he said 12 lines earlier and just put it in because it didn't sound right. So some of it's just what's in your ear. This is where we talked about, you know, this the delayed release of the movie and kind of how long it took for it to see the light of day.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it for a long, long time, and it finally came out. It was kind of anticlimactic. Like they kind of just threw it out.
Yeah, and this is like one of these, like the Pirate Bay, where you could, you know, download these movies. Didn't do well.
No, it's the lowest grossing of all the
ratings.
Both in box office and attendance.
I have to say again, what a great job Mouse did, our guy John Mouse, on these animations, just making those things fly around the screen like that. It's just so impressive to me. I love this. This is one of my favorite review headlines: "Knife Try."
That's clever.
There's lots of things I'd like to do differently. I mean, you know, I don't think there's anybody who's sort of directed a film or.
It's sad that Jim passed away. I don't think he couldn't have been more than 52 or so.
Yeah, he was young,
like that.
very young.
I don't think anyone's ever going to be happy with.
He was the first director to pass, and then Danny Steinman after him.
Yeah, I wish it had been a little bit darker, a little bit edgier.
You want to make the best movie you can make.
Todd's great. He's
a lot of fun.
He's doing very well. Too,
and like Luke, you'd pointed out that he works with
well, like
Patrick
with Last House on the Left, you had Sean and Wes went on to create these big. Wes with Nightmare, Sean with Friday, and now Patrick Lussier was Wes Craven's editor. You have Todd Farmer who wrote A Friday. Now they're kind of teaming up, going around doing Drive Angry. They did My Bloody Valentine 3D.
Yep. And they're supposed to do the next Halloween. But
they
that
were,
kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
That movie's in limbo. Maybe it won't be when this comes out.
TV show called Andromeda.
That's right. She was with
Lexa Doig. Another one who just doesn't want to talk about her experience making this movie. I guess
I was lucky too because I remember doing
the
book.
Though, for the
yeah,
book,
I was lucky too because it was like Freddy vs. Jason. I was just able to go to the press events, so people were much. I could get everyone because they're all there for press.
I remember when you were out in Las Vegas for that boxing
match thing.
Yeah. But I think the fact that and again it's interesting that this took a whole other turn too, with like an alter universe, Jason X books and comics and all that.
It has a bigger life, I think, that way than the movie itself.
And maybe it should have been that to begin with. But who knows? But
I remember that ad when it premiered.
And no matter what they are or how ridiculous they might be at times, I'm going to sit and watch them. I probably enjoy them.
I think in general,
but it's true. Who doesn't? I'm sorry, but if you're a horror fan or a fan of this series, and when they air a marathon on whatever it is, you're gonna sit and watch it, even if it's just playing in the background.
And that sometimes is difficult.
It's always interesting though because of the different studios. I don't think I ever see the New Line movies and the Paramount movies
together.
Yeah, and
I think with the
marathon.
Blu-ray set that's coming out,
It's gonna be
it's just come out, I should say, is the first time all the movies have been brought together into one big.
And then there are also a little self-plug. We have a little mini book of Crystal Lake memories in there as well.
The Blu-ray
That's
set.
very cool with new stuff.
Yep. Winner kills all. Chapter 11.
Ever since the idea for
It's a cool shot, I will say.
It is. I used that for the back cover of your book.
It did, that's right.
Freddy was first suggested in the late 1980s.
It's weird because I remember growing up and not really ever thinking that. Like I was, I guess, one of those fanboys who wanted this.
Me either. No, I never.
Yeah.
I'd heard the idea. In fact, I want to say back in like '88 or '89, some like mutual, like a friend of my agent, or maybe a client of my agent that I had at the time, had written a treatment for Freddy versus Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually pretty good, but it was the first time I ever thought, well, that's kind of a weird idea.
Yeah.
Why would they want to make that kind of movie? I never had that. Maybe that comes from a different sect of fans than I'm in or that you're in.
Yeah.
I was never like a big, like I can't wait for that movie.
Yeah.
But I think Kane lobbied for it. I think Robert
Definitely.
lobbied for it. All the Fango conventions and what have you. So it definitely
sounds like something fun to make. I'm sure it'd be great for them to do.
Oh yeah. It's just here we go. Kane and poor Kane who kind of got ousted from this whole thing.
Too, maybe it's generational. Like I guess because I grew up with the early ones, my secret hope was, they're going to go back to the basics. They're going to go back, and these were always like, okay, this is continuing in the direction of gimmick, like This Takes Manhattan.
Right.
This is going to be a fun hoop movie, like a wrestling movie or something.
Right.
But it's definitely not.
I do wish that that they would go back to and do one that just was just a straight on Friday the 13th movie without any gimmicks or bullshit, kind of thrown into, try to appeal to a wider audience or whatever.
But then at the same time, this definitely rejuvenated the Friday the 13th brand. It was a hit again.
Oh,
made
God,
a lot of money.
I mean, you and I were at the premiere.
I remember.
At the party, and it was a big thing that night. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that night as long as I live because it was such kind of like. I was there with you, and there was Sean, and John Ritter was standing next to us at one point, and I dare say that John Ritter passed away like a week later or something like crazy. But it was quite a night. I mean, just to be in the middle of that whole circle in the media event that was surrounding.
Yeah, it was the Cinerama Dome, so it was like a real premiere for Jason for the first time.
Yep.
And there was a huge difference. I remember even doing the book was like now suddenly kids wanted to be movie like it wasn't a stigma to be in a Friday the 13th movie like 'cause this was after Scream. It was like young actors wanted to be in it.
Right.
It was hip
Jason
and cool.
Ritter and Akina and all the young kids who were in this.
Well, Eve and Pink both tried out for the movie.
Who did?
Pink and Eve.
Really? I didn't know that.
So,
wow.
Yeah, and they went with
Kelly
Rowland. Yeah, they went with her.
Interesting.
So yeah, people were lobbying for it.
But I mean, this movie was in development for over. I mean, I want to say 17, 18 years. Am I wrong on that?
No,
it's
a long, and they spent over $10 million on scripts.
On scripts, yeah. Yep.
So the budget's a lot higher. The total budget.
Yeah, Mark Ordesky, who was one of the very top execs at New Line at the time, who you saw briefly here. He talked about how it was, one of the most, like just stuck in development movies in the history of Hollywood.
Well, I understand what Noel was saying. You're like, oh yeah, great, Freddy versus Jason. And when you sit down and think about it, how do you do it? That work?
I think ultimately what they ended up what they came up with was almost like, well, how else would you have done it? Like where. I mean, you could have these versions where the cast members from all the other movies come in, and I think that becomes almost too unwieldy for a general audience.
Well, who's the main character? Yeah.
Right.
Well, and two, it's hard because you have two characters who are both villains, so they can't be the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a good job of balancing it, I thought. They did have a Nightmare on Elm Street feel for part of it and a Friday the 13th feel for part of it, and they kind of balanced that out pretty well.
Right. But I also felt in a weird way, I hate to not to get down on our neighbors up north, but there is the difference between Canadian movies and American movies, and I think Ronnie, you did a great job. I think Bride of Chucky was shot in Vancouver too, or at least part of it. That had a different vibe though, and I almost was like, it's almost meant more for. I don't know. There was just a different sensibility about Freddy Jason than Bride of Chucky, and I almost would have rather seen the darker version of this that didn't have like some of the things that just felt a little too maybe overlit or maybe a little too slick.
Well, being a diehard Jason fan, like, seeing a different woman as Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah, which I didn't like.
And the camp looks so different to me.
Yeah. Just go back to the original locations. It was like an argument I had when we did Halloween 6. Like, film it at the actual house.
Yeah.
What are we bullshitting around with these fake stand-in locations? Go get the real thing. Or get my friend CJ Strawn to make the real house. Another one who just passed away. She was this production designer of the Elm Streets. And it's crazy to me how many people have, the past couple of years. It's just unreal.
I don't know how much we go into in the doc here, but even the book, there were so many different drafts and ideas.
Right.
It would have been a whole chapter. Yeah,
you could do a whole.
And there's crazy stuff they came up with.
Documentary about every version. We kind of touch on what the versions were. There was this whole thing with Dominic Necros, this kind of cult leader.
The Fred Heads.
Fred Heads. It's all talked about here, but you can't really. In the span of a segment of this documentary,
there was one where
into great detail.
They put Jason on trial and everything, and then there's Louis Abernathy. He did one. Is that his name?
Yes.
From
Titanic. Yeah.
He did one where literally there's a giant Freddy car, and then Freddy shoots a big booger, and like Jason's in the booger. Like, I'm not kidding. It was like crazy. Yeah. So.
Too bad they didn't make that one.
Yeah, Booker Jason.
Said for Wes Craven, the mastermind behind A Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy Krueger.
Well, it's interesting, too, that Sean remained connected, but Wes was really not consultative, I understand.
Well, his contract was so different, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
but he didn't even seem to want to be involved with Freddy vs. Jason.
Honestly, I think probably Wes would have been involved more, but he had a bad deal. When he sold Nightmare on Elm Street, he really sold the farm. And that's really the way that went down. He just didn't have any control.
Well, because also, when he came back to do New Nightmare for New Line, that derailed Freddy vs. Jason, which is why they ended up doing... I think it was Jason X, because they wanted to do Freddy vs. Jason, then Wes came back and said, I want to do New Nightmare. So he was like, we're going to do New Nightmare, so we can't do Freddy vs. Jason. So then Sean said, well, I don't want to sit on this property, so let's do Jason X. So, and everything kept bumping, so it was a crazy, weird time.
Now, Sean has always kind of had a stake in Friday the 13th, right?
Yeah, he gets money.
Well,
every time they make
more
them.
of a stake, yeah, he does. But when he did the deal after... the option with Paramount expired after Part 8, and they just were ready to kind of let it go at that point. And when Sean came in and kind of bought the rights out again from Paramount and brought them to New Line, his deal was rewritten completely. So he was granted a whole lot of things that he didn't have prior to that. And still has. I have to give Justin mad props on this keying of Ronnie. Which this interview actually was shot for, his name was Jason, for Never Sleep Again. But it's all the quotes we didn't get to use about Jason. That chapter in Never Sleep Again was all the Freddy stuff, and this time we get to use all of the quotes about Jason. So, but the keying on this is so much better from the green screen. Ronnie, this was actually shot in Beijing, China, and I was Skyping that interview. And Ronnie was sitting, his leg was broken, or his foot was broken. So he had his foot propped up during the interview. But he had to sit in this big pink chair. So the pink chair always kind of annoyed me. So Justin, when he did the background key on this, he kind of blended the pink chair into the background. Look how clever.
Yeah.
It looks so much better now.
This is what I learned when I was making Bride Chucky.
I do have to say that when I saw this in the theater opening weekend, like we watched it earlier, we saw the earlier cut.
Yeah.
It did get a big reaction. I mean, I remember people cheering when they were fighting, and it definitely had that wrestling,
Yeah.
It worked in a way that Part 9 and 10, I don't remember working that well in the theater.
Right.
So.
It definitely had the crowd going, got them excited again.
Yeah.
I remember loving it because I think mainly because I went into it thinking this is going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Just because I knew the history of it taking forever to be done. I thought this was going to be terrible. It was much better than what I expected. Like, I mean, years later, I've kind of had a different view on certain things with it. But I remember being in the theater just loving it.
And too, like, the bed kill is a great kill. It had some good moments.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
That character, I love. That Trey character.
Yeah, Jesse Hutch, who was in a movie that I sort of wrote.
Yeah, Tooth Fairy. Yeah.
God.
Well, is he working still?
I don't know. He's again Canadian.
Yeah.
Not to use
Doug Curtis. He, I think, took over a bit. Like, Sean is a producer, but ended up not actually really being on set.
Right.
So
yeah, Doug I think was more
that.
like line producing the movie and kind of like coordinating everything. Sean's not that kind of producer.
Yeah.
Sean's the kind of producer that, will give you his creative notes and kind of let you go make your movie.
Tall, lanky,
clean mask. And I think that there was an attitude that...
Now, I have to say I disagree with Jeff. I don't always disagree with him. I usually do agree with him, is what I should say. But, I mean, here he's talking about bringing the look of Jason back to the, early Paramount. They didn't get... If that's what they were going for, they didn't get it at all. I don't think he looked anything like the Paramount Jason.
I agree. He didn't look like Jason from 2, 3, or 4.
No, not at all. Yeah. Completely with the jacket and all of that stuff they put on him. It just was weird. I didn't like the makeup for Jason in this personally, but I don't know.
And they never showed his face, right? They were planning to, but I don't think they ever showed him without his mask. We never see.
Well, she lifts his mask to give him mouth to mouth, but that's enough.
Okay, yeah.
That's all you see part of it.
Yeah, is he asleep? I think.
Yeah, he's the hypnocil.
Yeah, that's right. So. That was in a lot of the other drafts I read. I remember that started early on in many of the drafts.
Right.
They use that to get people into the dream world and all this stuff.
And part of me really wishes that those fans have been able to see kind of that dream that they were always looking for, which was Robert and Kane. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. But this is showbiz. And
I feel like I have to have my douchebag moment right here, my Hollywood. at the Evil
I saw
Dead.
him the other night.
well, at the Evil Dead remake, like the midnight show, I look to my left. There's Damian Shannon.
Oh, nice.
I'm like, I wonder if Mark Swift's going to be here. 2 minutes later, I look over. Mark Swift walks in.
Yeah, one doesn't go anywhere without the other.
Well, what's great is they actually weren't together. They were with other friends, but one row apart. It was like my row, Damian Shannon's row, then Swift's.
You need to twist that into like gossip and you say, oh my God, they were fighting and
it was a huge.
So, oh my God.
Well, right here, we will say they hate each other.
They only speak to each other through their manager.
We're totally kidding, by the way.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was both really nice guys, actually.
Yeah, super sweet.
When the writer's strike was going on a few years ago, I had to walk the picket line with those guys a couple times. So it was right around the time I think they were shooting or about to shoot the remake, or maybe had just shot it. Now that I think they had just wrapped. I think in fact, they had to avoid the strike. They had to rush the movie because when you're on strike, they're not allowed to do any writing. But that's where I found out that they had named a character after you.
Oh my God! I remember I was lucky. Maybe I should say for the remake. I'll wait with us.
Yeah,
I'll share that story.
Yeah. What was cool about it, after I saw Evil Dead, I went home and I follow a bunch of horror writers, because I'm still a nerd. And Mark,
no,
not at all.
And I actually wrote Mark Swift saying oh, I just saw you at the Evil Dead screening. It's oh, you should have come up and said, hey, we could have nerded out or something.
Yeah, they're very approachable.
Oh yeah,
cool guys, and really are fans. They're not, And I feel for them in a way because I think Freddy Jason has a lot of moments that they have to defend or explain away because it wasn't what they wrote. They were rewritten anonymously by David Goyer.
So a lot of things were compressed. I know that.
Yeah, I mean timelines and and little lines like Jason was Freddy was supposed to call him Mama's boy at one point, and that was their version, and then in the Goyer version it was hey asshole.
Yeah, well even the worst lines were I know in the film, Freddy turns to Kelly Rowland and says oh how sweet dark meat.
Yeah.
Oh god.
And then I think
using another colorful not so pleasant word that Kelly Rowland ad-libbed, which I find pretty repugnant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which they had nothing to do with writing that line.
They didn't. And again, I feel for them because I know the writer gets the fucking rap for this shit, and you just have to live with it. It's your name up there.
Mm-hmm.
You just dropped an F-bomb. You're getting passionate about this.
What people don't know is your name may be up there, but it's still movie by committee.
Yes.
And a lot of people have a lot of say in what they actually end up saying. And was her name Paula Shore? Was she one who Paula Shaw?
Paula Shaw.
Again, I remember you and I when we first saw that kind of rough cut at Jeff's place. And we both kind of looked at each other who's that?
Yes, yeah. She was really sweet when I talked to her, and she's like, it was difficult. I know that a lot of fans are attached to Betsy Palmer.
Sure.
But I do the best I can, and she really tried.
And that's all you can do. Yeah. She can't be Betsy Palmer, but
But they didn't even give her the right sweater,
Right.
So you're kind of okay.
Just little things.
Yeah.
Attention to detail is important.
Yeah.
But just blame, you know what? It was Canada. You just blame.
But to be fair, they offered it to Betsy Palmer. She said no. So
Right.
He wasn't a very nice.
But I think they also could have dug a little deeper in their pockets.
Yeah,
to pay Betsy what was what was fair.
Agreed.
Just mouthing off.
That's actually a photo of the issue. Monica looks great, and I have to give her just so many great so much great. She was hilarious in this. I mean, you're not actually able to watch it because we're chatting away here. But when you watch Monica, she comes in with such exuberance and energy and humor.
And did she come back twice for you guys?
She did. Yeah. She was one of the rare people who just kind of said, "Let me do it again, and I'll talk all about Jason this time." She looks great too.
Yeah. I've seen Catherine Isabel. She was just on an episode of a TV show called Motive. And I think she's still working.
She is.
Down in a lake, already have a deformity, be insecure about it, and have to watch your mother's head get cut off. I think the fact that he just is killing people isn't that bad.
And this is her through the whole thing. Yeah. Like her whole shtick is, we
I love
should really
this.
feel a little sympathy for Jason.
Well,
he had a rough time.
Well, one thing I remember in seeing this is like, okay, I know it's a kind of a popcorn movie, wrestling movie, but okay, all these people are dying and the kids are going to go party the next night. Like, no one cares that their friends are dead.
Right. Like, everybody's dead. Let's just go to school.
Woohoo, rave.
First of all, it smelled to high heaven because it was actually like
the cow shit, right?
Yeah.
Just the smell of the manure or whatever was horrible.
This film's very uneven as far as the deaths go. Like, Jason kills a billion people.
Right,
and
yeah,
Freddy
gets very few.
Yeah.
I mean, Freddy pretty much gets cocked block with Catherine Isabel's death
that's
as well.
kind of the plot, though. I mean, that's Freddy kind of uses Jason to get what he wants, but then Jason ends up going too far. And Freddy's like, I got to stop him. This is bullshit. I'm going to get some of it. It's the Catherine Isabel thing that sets Freddy
off.
off.
And he just killed Zach. Doesn't he kill Zach?
Zach Ward, yeah.
Zach Ward, yeah.
I love Ronnie Yu. I just think he's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
He had some of the greatest lines in Never Sleep Again.
He's very enthusiastic too.
Yeah.
More energy. That was his catchphrase.
Yeah.
On the set that they said.
Yeah. Or shoe leather. It's shoe leather.
Blood by the gallon. Yeah.
We're gonna have a stunt double for you. We don't want you getting hurt.
I'm glad I did read that there was some animosity between Kane Hodder and Ken because Ken doubled for Kane in part 8, a scene or 2,
right? And
then he got but apparently they patched it up. And
they have. So I think Kane's really moved on after all these years, and
because it's been 10 years now.
I can't believe. I think they've done some conventions
and
stuff together now. I think it's all kind of water under the bridge at this point, but.
I mean, I can't believe this movie came out 10 years ago.
I
looked 10 years this month. I can't believe
across the the way from each other, and this is where it all kind of began.
It's
I met
amazing.
you about 10 years ago now. It's insane.
It took forever for them to figure out how to keep this machete on fire. They had to keep putting petroleum and all this.
Still would have been cool to see Kane.
If we're still alive, I don't know.
Shut up. Say that.
Some of the extras.
But
didn't know.
But this was an event movie in every way. I mean, New Line made a huge event out of it. It was publicized unlike any other Friday the 13th movie. I mean, and this is also the thing that, remember at the time, all of his New Line, Friday the 13th merchandise was coming out?
Yeah, I remember.
The playing cards,
That's
the
right.
lunchbox,
The models.
the models, all of this officially licensed stuff was finally coming out. I didn't like it because it didn't look like the early Jason, but there it was. Suddenly, it was kind of right there. And
but you maybe could argue
the stuff that we wanted as a kid was kind of all suddenly in front of us. There was no Jason merchandise when we were growing up watching the early movies.
No such thing.
Like that. No.
That would probably have been.
Even to find a hocky mask to be Jason for Halloween, it's like you'd have to go to an ice skating rink to find something that kind of looked like it.
It's true. Well, so you could argue this look, and that was right for that time for kids of that era.
Yeah.
That's what movies looked. That was the language of the slightly MTV-ish, brighter. I don't know how to describe it, but that aesthetic that captured that era. So it couldn't be too old school because kids of that era wouldn't want to see it. But
I remember when Jason Goes to Hell came out, they actually sold that mask. Where it was just a rubber pull-on mask. But I remember anytime I went to Spencer Gifts, they always had a ton of those Jason Goes to Hell masks.
Yeah.
But even then, there wasn't that much. It hadn't really you hadn't seen the sideshow collectible things that are incredible. I mean, just these amazing, reproductions of Freddy Jason. Remember that because we went to sideshow.
Well, that was a huge turning point for the book. That was the moment I remember we talked about. If you remember, but that's when we were discussing. Okay, I thought, well, this would be a small paperback. It can't be a big thing. And then suddenly, Paramount New Line were so helpful, and Sean with photos that it's like, well, maybe it should be like a coffee table book.
Yeah,
but that's crazy. But then we're like, well, Sideshow sells these Jason models. They sell out in a minute.
Yeah,
they're $50. So we're like, well, maybe there is an audience for a high quality
Yeah.
And that was a turning point. Okay, let's do this as a
and
real
and then
quality.
Jeff and Peter and I just kind of, we pooled our money. And I mean, if anybody has any illusions of the fact that book was like this big mainstream publishing, I mean, this was made in Peter's house and in my living room and my dining room and wherever else we just hid out. And then and those boxes that were mailed to people were mailed by us.
Yeah.
I mean,
the first
I'm not going to like put any pretense on any of this. We did it all ourselves.
Well, like Titan Books, they distribute it now for us, but the first printing was us.
It was all us. I mean, we had parties. Like Larry Zerner was packing boxes with us. We all kind of we gathered at your house.
Yeah, and we did the party.
Marathon packing parties. And
we went to Sean's. He signed books.
Sean's signing books, and Peter and Jeff actually picked those books up from the dock that came from where we were published.
I remember.
In Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And because we were so late in getting them.
Oh, it was crazy to look. That's what I mean. I think if I would have known the beginning, it would be like, there's no way I can do this. But because it happened slowly, incrementally,
right?
We got more and more crazy. Okay, well, we'll take the next step and do this.
Well, you think I don't think the same thing right
now?
Yeah, what we're doing here. Look at this animation. This is hilarious.
It's awesome.
This is them going from Ohio to Crystal Lake. Look at this.
Crystal Lake.
Watch.
Is approximately 600 miles away.
Yeah. Oops.
I love it's like the little mystery machine, like they're driving across.
Able to get Jason back to Crystal Lake in
another, artist did that for us, and really last minute, and just came through. Just flying colors, great stuff. You just have to. Sometimes you have to put it out to the fans, like we need this.
Yeah.
And they deliver.
Well, it's great you can do that now. Like
back
the
in
internet,
the book, not so much.
Yeah, so much.
Yeah, there was no Facebook then.
Well, I remember when I did the book, I literally did all the, like people realize too, like we did all the layouts ourselves. So
You
I remember,
did, not
yeah,
we. You.
I remember I would go to the cafe like every day with my little laptop, and I would do these layouts. And I remember the waitress, because I used to go to this hamburger place once a week and get my same order. And after a while, she's like, "What are you doing?" Because like you see me like with shots of like bloody heads and shit on my laptop all the time.
No, I mean the look of the book is 100% Pete. I mean you. Yeah. There's not a page.
And I never did a layout. I'm like, I just taught myself my own
layouts.
I don't know what I'm doing.
I remember.
It was fun.
And then Mark Matsuno did the cover design, and he designs like all the Oscar posters. But we got him because Jeff happened to know him.
Yeah, that was great.
So we got lucky in a lot of ways, but it was all just homemade.
Yeah. New Line was the other thing too. It turned around when Freddy vs. Jason was coming out. Suddenly, New Line, not that they weren't helpful, but now they're like, wow, okay, this will help us with our movie too, and they let us use the logo on the cover. And although I remember one interesting stipulation was they gave us all those great photos, but they told me you cannot put Freddy by himself in a photo because this is a Jason book, so Freddy always has to be with Jason in a photo.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
So I'm like, fine.
Huh,
but that was cool.
There's plenty of photos with the two of them. Interesting. Yeah. I don't remember that. If you told me that, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
I mean, the battle is an amazing battle. I mean, the technical,
because it's real too. Not too much CGI.
That was a cool effect.
Yeah. This part definitely. I remember the audience was like.
I mean, this
cheering.
is really like we even bring it up in the documentary. It's like it is like a Monty Python kind of routine at the end. I mean, they're just hacking each other to shit at this point.
And I remember backing up.
Well, too, I mean, whatever faults you might want to say the movie has, the ending it paid off. It gave you what you came to see. You got the kick-ass battle.
Place your
best. That's true.
That's what she's talking about here.
Yeah.
And Quentin Tarantino was like, "What do you mean you didn't say place your bets? That's what I was waiting for."
Did he say that?
He said to her, "Yeah."
Oh wow.
Yeah. He was there that night, remember?
Oh, that's right, he was. Oh my God. Yeah. We sound like such douches.
I know.
I just name dropping.
No, we were like the last guys.
Oh yeah, we were. Yeah,
we were not, on the red carpet.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think I remember.
I think we gave Larry and Carolyn our tickets.
We did,
and because we'd seen
Larry
it,
Zerner,
and then we went to the party. We just went to the party.
Yeah.
Well, we were like last let in there too.
Well, I remember when I got to go to the premiere of the remake. You're on the red carpet, and we had no choice, and people are like, "Who are you?" The photographers are like, "Get out of the fucking way," because I'm trying to photograph the real celebrity. So
yeah, they don't want to talk.
Yeah, yeah, you're nobody. So
right, but it's still fun to be.
Yeah, oh totally, it's fun to watch everyone else.
See,
do that.
It's like Monty Python.
So over the top,
totally.
The violence and everything that the audience would laugh at the violence rather than really affected by the violence.
That's true.
Jason, he and I almost became teammates. And he actually saved my life in the end. When Freddy was about
it's kind of a love story.
Me.
It's a Beauty and the Beast.
At the very end of the movie. And so he was
it's kind of incredible at the end. They were so able to make it where no one really wins the battle, but you didn't feel unsatisfied in a sense. You know,
Right.
the winking thing. and all
Well,
that.
I mean, I think Bob Shea is the one who
Yeah.
ultimately, you know, the head, the CEO of New Line at the time. You know, he just, I think he finally said, you can't. There is no winner. You just have to find a way to kind of merge the two somehow and give each one.
Yeah.
Hey, look
Oh,
who that is.
God.
Oh, look at that.
Hilarious. That was Luke, by the way.
That was a crazed fan.
Yeah.
Just as many as it would appease.
But in a nice way.
Yeah.
The original ending. I hated the ending. I thought it's a wrong.
Yeah, I remember when we first watched it, Dan, that we saw the original ending
Where it was Jason Ritter becomes
Freddy.
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
I remember that.
was
What
in
was that?
Yeah. I think they hadn't reshot it yet.
No, they hadn't.
Maybe they were like gonna do it like very
Yeah.
soon around that time. Because I want to say that was like around May or June that you and I
Mhm.
sat down and watched
Yeah, it
that,
was.
and then the movie came out in August.
Yeah, it was quick. Yeah.
Love the movie, but hate
I remember you and I like.
No, I
we
wanna-
also
yeah.
went to see like. The heck was out? 28 days later.
Sure. Oh, was
that
it?
same day? Like we were like
Okay.
it was like one thing after another.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I had several callbacks for the part, but months
It was like a
later,
horror
I got a
marathon.
call to do the reshoot.
This is Doug Tate, who you know who Doug. Did you interview Doug?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. You know he played the reshoot Jason.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't.
He's done like a ton of work in like
Oh,
costumes
so
and
many
makeup,
movies,
and
he's in the Star Trek. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's huge. He's a huge, you know, just character.
That's cool.
But wait, but they didn't bring Ken back for the because I think they shot this locally. I think they shot this in LA,
That's right,
and they
yeah.
they brought because Doug was originally considered for playing Jason.
Oh, okay.
And then gave it to Ken, and then when they did the reshoot for that scene, they brought Doug to do it. See, I'm telling you something you don't know. For
Yeah, I
once.
know.
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
That was a great Rorschach test for the fans.
Well, I remember near the end of the book, I was getting really tired. Like it was hard to. Like at a certain point, like I have to stop interviewing people.
I
Like
remember.
is that normal?
Us
Yeah,
too.
yeah, you have to give it. You have to say, okay,
You have
I
to
got
let it be
everyone.
what it
Yeah,
is, you
I
know,
can't.
and you can't change the world with it.
Yeah, yeah.
as
You just
much
can't
as
fit
we'd
it.
love to.
Yeah.
Freddy or Jason? Who
You have to
won?
let go.
Projects are never finished. They're
They're
abandoned.
abandoned. It's true.
Right.
I made Freddy defeat Jason, and then I killed Freddy. So I'm the winner. I'm the victor. I won.
She was hilarious.
Yeah.
New Line put the
They were great
Freddy
posters,
versus
too.
Jason publicity
They were cool.
machine into hyperdrive with a pre-fight
Yep, he was
I
there.
remember that. Yeah.
boxing event held in Las Vegas.
You went. I didn't go.
No. Yeah, I drove out. I remember I drove out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Soon,
It was fun.
Jason Voorhees
I remember you got stuck in a mega.
Oh
traffic
yeah,
jam
there was
coming
this crazy
back to
thing. Yeah.
LA.
It was crazy.
to comic books and
But I remember there thinking.
There's the lunch bag. You
yeah,
had the lunch
I
box.
did. I remember sitting there thinking, wow, you know, like this is real publicity. Like this is so weird.
Yeah.
The early Friday things were sort of like just tossed out there and scorned, and this is like getting like red carpet.
Yep.
MTV, you know, press. And,
Huge.
Yeah.
That's probably one reason it did.
And it was #1 for 2 weeks in a row. I remember.
Was
that.
it both
Yeah.
2 weeks? Wow, that's huge.
Yep.
I think it was the highest grossing of the bunch.
Yeah, I think it opened to $25 million or something.
It was big.
It was incredible.
But to those who toiled in the early years of both franchises, Freddy vs. Jason was more hype than Holy Grail.
After seeing the movie, I guess I was kind of hoping that I would see.
It's like we're getting pulled in by our own work.
I know.
here.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you kind of get.
we're
Well,
just
I haven't
watching
seen
it.
it. Yeah.
Honestly,
I haven't
there's
seen it.
But you know,
movie
I think again, you know, I think Kane's past it. He did his own biography. You know,
Yeah,
his
he did.
story of his life. I think
Unmasked,
maybe
it's called.
Unmasked, and I
Yeah.
think maybe that was cathartic for him. Telling that story. He approached you about doing it.
He
at
did.
one
Yeah,
point.
it was right after the book. I was so burnt out.
I remember. Yeah, yes, you were.
Yeah.
I think I'm about to join you in that.
And that's not a criticism, but definitely in our screenplay, we thought that there would be scenes in them with a little more tension.
Well, it's got its faults. I think it was pretty true to the spirit.
I really wish Kane would have been Jason in this.
Yeah.
Well, it's just almost like it was like a why.
Yeah,
if
why
it was
do
a
it?
why do it, then why not just do
Yeah.
it? It didn't really make sense.
Yeah.
So I just felt that, I don't know if it's Ken or just his direction, but I felt that Jason is the most boring in this one. Out of
He
all
didn't
the
have a lot of
films.
life.
Yeah.
He just kind of walks around.
lumbered and. Yeah, if they were looking for emotion, I didn't see a lot of it.
He's a puppet. It's interesting. It's the only time in any of the movies that Jason's kind of controlled by someone in a way.
yeah.
So it's
There were
he's something like a dog or something, you know.
Yeah.
A Freddy versus Ash.
I never warmed to this idea, but
No, well, that's why it became comics
yeah.
as opposed to.
Yeah, that's a good
feature
idea
film.
for a comic.
Mhm.
Do you remember all the after this was a hit? They were talking about doing like Pinhead versus Michael
And
Myers.
Michael
I'm like,
Myers.
what?
Oh yeah, they and they really did. I mean, I know that's true because
Yeah.
Malik,
Mhm.
God called me one day and he says, "Oh my God, you know, Dimensions pushing
Ugh,
a
God.
Pinhead," and they just, the Akkads weren't about to do that.
Yeah. Well, and again, not hyperbole, I don't think, but this did really kick off the whole. Now we have like Python versus Gatorade and all that, all that stuff. Yeah, and versus. I think that stemmed from this. Am I wrong? Or there were a lot of verses. I remember there being like direct-to-video versus movies things.
Well, again, it's everything when there's something that's successful, it starts a trend of
Mm-hmm. They talked about Freddy vs. Jason 2 for a while, but that was advanced. Well, I know the Ash thing, but
yeah.
I think you can only do this kind of thing once.
This is hilarious, where she talks about how they did away with Laurie in the comic book.
But you know who kills me? Jason. 2 pages in, I have a machete hacking through my head, and he wouldn't even have that machete to kill me unless I returned it to him. I did the right thing. And then he cuts my face in half. He hadn't even showed up on the scene yet. I changed my mind. He doesn't have morals. He's just a heartless, soulless killer.
She's just great.
And at a large level,
so much personality.
Yeah.
In comics now, we sort of have the responsibility of keeping the original continuity going. And Freddy, Jason, Ash.
And Jeff Katz really has been, a big, kind of promoter. I think through his own comic book label, he's kind of kept this brand alive, and he's kept, brought some of the early characters from the series back. That's supposed to be Tommy Jarvis.
Well, it's cool because I think like this, the movies like Jason X and Freddy, they can live on and do these cool things in comics and other medium. And the fans of them have more stories.
I remember even early on there were those Eric Morse books, and he wrote those kind of like that quadrilogy of books.
Was it Jason's Curse or
and the Mother's Day?
Mother's Day, that's right. Yeah. I think he did a 5th one that was only available online.
And I think he tried to bridge the continuity between the TV show and the movies.
That's cool. Well, to me, that's another sign of like a true phenomenon or a real, franchise that lives on is when they start doing the fan fiction and the spin-off books like James Bond and Star Wars does and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely achieved that status at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, some people out there think we did an okay job.
And here we go to the first chapter that doesn't exist in the book.
I know.
Yet. Will happen one day.
2 months after the box office.
Now, was it really part 12 or is Freddy vs. Jason considered part 11? I guess it is. I don't know.
11 and a half.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this was inevitable. This movie was going to happen one way or another.
I remember
there's no big surprise to me that they went and did this version, this reboot.
Yeah, I remember finishing the book and Freddy vs. I'm like, okay, I know they're going to do a remake, and this is not going to be the complete history of Freddy for long,
but,
eventually.
But it was for a while.
It was for a while,
and it still is. It's just that chapter hasn't been written yet.
Yes,
but we've kind of given you a prelude to it. You can use all of these interviews.
Yes.
But I think with Platinum Dunes got involved, and they had kind of really staked their name and reputation on doing remakes and reboots, and one that's personal to me in the Amityville horror, to say the least. I've been involved with that title for a very long time in a personal way. I knew the family and all that. You know these stories.
Yes. That's another commentary.
That's a whole other commentary too. But
I do think this movie changed a lot. Like, I feel like in some ways, the Friday the 13th remake is really a remake of Texas Chainsaw. Like, everything after that remake started to look like that remake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the tone, everything. So then everything went back to being hardcore and.
Yeah, it went to that very nasty kind of sense of right. But also, I think the fact that they brought in.
Aided by partner Michael Bay.
The team that did Chainsaw, from the producer, obviously Michael Bay and Platinum Dunes, to the director himself, to Daniel Pearl, who was, really the Chainsaw guy, shot the original Chainsaw, shot the remake. It's like Friday the 13th as a Chainsaw movie, in my view.
In many ways, yeah. Well, even with underground tunnels and he's much more like Leatherface in many ways.
Some beautiful artwork that we got from Christopher Shy, who is one of the concept artists, and he was able to give us all of this amazing kind of concept previs art that he had done for the movie. It's all throughout this chapter, and it's really incredible.
It's gorgeous.
More serious, a little harder edge.
I mean, it's something to be said about this prelude. I mean, it goes on for like 25 minutes.
Yeah, I've read somewhere it's one of the longest. The credit title name comes the farthest into a movie of any movie.
Wow, or at least any horror movie.
The word Friday the 13th shows up at like 2-minute mark or something.
I thought it was interesting that they didn't bring Harry back for Freddy Jason or this one, Harry Manfredini. And it's strange to me because, and I did use the, very sparing.
Yeah, once I think. Yeah.
The sound,
Yeah.
the Jason sound, but
A mashup or a.
I just think it would have been an interesting thing to have his music over a movie like this and see what would
yeah.
have done to it. Because there's really no music in the movie.
No, it's
Very
almost
little.
atonal. It doesn't really
Yeah.
have a theme or.
Nope.
Yeah.
And I think it would have benefited from, in my
Yeah.
opinion, from a little bit more.
Yeah. Character.
This is funny. Andrew Cash cut this together, and everybody's kind of chiming in on what it is.
Yeah.
We did not want to say none of these movies happened. I mean, it was important for us not to sort of say, "Hey, we're just starting over," and that didn't exist.
Absolutely.
That's not something we wanted to do.
Really? That's
But of
like
course,
hard to.
they wanted
It's hard to swallow that,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
again, I have
yeah.
to say they are, and I don't mean to say
Oh, they're
this in a
great guys.
negative way, but
Yeah.
they are just the writers, and I don't mean this to
Yeah.
say that they are just the writers, but that's
Mhm.
how Hollywood treats writers.
Yeah, true.
You are kind of just the writer, and
Mhm.
whatever ends up on film is kind of whatever they want it to
Yeah.
be. So these guys have to come in, and again, I feel for them, and I understand where they're coming from, which is, you have to kind of say, hey, here's what we intended.
And they thought about. I know they told me they worked on the script They really did a really long time.
He's on Mad Men now. and
Yeah,
doing
he's
very
also
well.
on what's that? Drop Dead Diva. He was on that.
Yeah. But I have to say one thing that's very cool about this chapter is that the cast is still so young and fresh that everybody came in with this great energy and great enthusiasm. There's nothing jaded about this cast yet. Let's hope never.
Give it time.
But
Okay.
true that they. I mean, Derek Mears. And again, there is truly no one I think better suited to play the role than Derek because he
was good. I think
he was the best thing about the movie in my opinion. But he also really embraced it in a big way, like Kane in a way.
I hope they bring him back if there's another one.
I do too.
Find out he actually does cage fighting as a hobby.
But
when I was in school,
and he really related to the character because of the condition he was born with.
Yeah,
he has alopecia, and he talks to him about. I felt like Jason when I was a kid, So I think he brought a lot of himself to the part. But he comes to get into it with so much empathy.
Yeah. Wow.
Jason, like we're similar, and so I kind of had a relation or a tie to that character.
Derek Mears was the only person.
We never saw. Did we? Because we saw a brief glimpse of his face in the movie. I think the show. I remember in the deleted scenes, there's an alternate version of the time he gets his hockey mask.
Yeah, there was a. He
I
talks
actually
about
like the
the
second.
other
Yeah,
ending. It's a more emotional kind of like, why are you doing this to me? I
Actually,
thought you were my mother kind of thing.
I
to
actually
it.
liked it better. I think.
Yeah, that's what he says at the end of this piece.
Recreate this character.
I have to talk about Juliana here. Because we were shooting her and like everyone else against a green screen. She accidentally came in with a green shirt, so we had to let her borrow our makeup girl Lindsay, who I also have to give a major props to. Lindsay did your makeup in your scene.
She
you
was
met Lindsay.
great. Yes,
very talented, very in the moment. She actually learned. She was actually taught by Mark Shostrom, who did all of the effects in Nightmare 2, and that's how we met Lindsay. But Lindsay had to literally give Juliana the shirt off of her back because it wasn't green. If it was green, she would have disappeared, and she would have been a talking head, literally.
How does that affect a person?
Remember the kid who played Jason and Freddy? Jason
Spencer Stump.
Spencer Stump.
Yeah.
I think he didn't come to one of your events.
He did, and he came to one of the signings, and then I didn't remember on the phone, but then he came down. It was that one on the corner building.
Oh yeah,
in Hollywood.
I remember that. That's right.
So I think Derek really wanted.
Amanda Righetti's, big in television. She's on The Mentalist.
Yes, that's right.
She was very nice. Again, all the people came in that over. They were kind of running into each other, and you could tell it reminded me a little bit of Part 6, and that they all genuinely like each other.
Yeah,
there's a lot of love between the cast members on this movie.
The discussion was: is he running or is he walking? He ran in the first few films. 2 through 4, he was running.
I'm glad they brought back the running.
Yeah, that was cool.
It feels like if you see him running, all 240.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
4-foot machete.
They bought the bag back. I think they did they say it on here that they were really remaking the first 4 movies in a sense?
Right. That's what they kind of. Yeah. So they're kind of like amalgamating all of the moments. I mean, again, that's stuff that I don't understand is how he would kidnap a woman and keep her prisoner. I mean, I know they're trying to go with the idea that he's seeing the mother. But that's not what Jason would do. I'm sorry. I gotta argue against that one.
The underground tunnel. I understand that Marcus Nispel pushed for the underground tunnel concept. Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing too is I think some of the people involved, I'm not naming names, but they didn't really know that Jason wasn't in the first
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
So I think it was almost like having to educate the people that were going to make this as to the history of the franchise and kind of bringing them up to speed.
I mean, wasn't there like an idea of Jason in like an apartment building in
like
Chicago
New York
or something?
They were going to put Jason in a hotel.
What? Wait, what was he doing in a hotel?
I don't know, but that was a nameless producer's concept.
Interesting.
Jason
takes the condo development?
Yeah, something like that. I think it was like a big New York high-rise, like a hotel.
Okay.
But I also really
some great photos we got of like, the behind-the-scenes makeup. I think a lot of these were in the book, but some like this stuff obviously because you didn't.
Yeah, we didn't
the
remake. Didn't exist.
Yet.
Yeah. This is awesome, yeah.
But Scott Stoddard, who's the makeup guy, who's a great guy, brought all these photos in for us. These are all his like test makeup photos, and he actually got stopped going onto the plane going out to Austin, Texas, where they filmed it, and the security stopped him, and they opened up his case, and it had the hockey mask in it, and they're like, "Is this what we think it is?" And they're like, "Yeah," and everybody went kind of crazy, like in the terminal, like all the instead of like stopping the criminals, mad bombers from getting on the plane, they were all kind of jumping around and with joy seeing the actual hockey mask.
Oh yeah,
that's just got to be like a
what I associate with Jason.
template.
The film opens at Kreestahl Lake in one of the longest credit prologues on Friday the 13th, and perhaps
I remember realizing right from the prologue that this is going to be a more vicious, like when he hangs her up and burns her.
Oh yeah,
it felt a little more and brutal and saw-like than the other Friday things. But,
do you think they kind of had to though because of where the horror genre was going at that time? I don't.
I guess I look at like the kill where the girl was underneath the dock and he puts her, like that was like fun, but it didn't feel like mean. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say because he's killing people. Of course, it's mean spirited, but you know what I mean. There's that.
But there's a tonal thing about that.
Yeah.
There's a kind of like, is it done with a sense of humor or is it done with a kind of? So I have to think back to like the second movie with putting that machete through Tom McBride, the crippled guy's face. I mean, how cruel is that?
Yeah. I guess it wasn't
Maybe
torture.
We're just
too
old for these movies.
I guess hanging someone and burning him is like It's like prolonged torture. Like Jason usually just whacked him.
He doesn't torture him.
Yeah.
That felt a little.
It was always just a quick thing.
Yeah, this story was funny where they literally scared the crap out of this guy Jonathan Sadowski. He just decided to follow him out to the outhouses, which were like a long ways down the road, and so.
Are like a walk.
This is filmed in Texas, right?
Yeah, Austin, Texas.
Like there's nothing out there.
That's again some of those pieces of art you're seeing are all like Christopher Shy, who was this concept artist.
Well, it's interesting. At least when because they're rebooting it, they don't have to worry about location anymore because they can start fresh. So they don't.
Right.
They don't have to worry
about.
Yeah,
we talked about where's the geography. Where are you supposed to be? And a lot of them just laugh. They're like, we don't know where we're supposed to be. Although Nispel sort of said, it was supposed to be New Jersey, and there's there were some challenges between him and the production crew, the producing crew team.
Now, did Nispel want to shoot in Texas? Was he the one who pushed for it, or?
I think it was just I don't know why. I don't know why they ended up there.
Well, didn't they shoot? They shot Chainsaw there, yeah.
And it could have been maybe Daniel Pearl wanted to do it there again. Who knows?
Yeah. And the film did look, well lit, of course.
Yeah, but it has that sort of, silvery kind of Daniel Pearl cinematography, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily
a little more
Friday
color.
the 13th.
Yeah, a little more. It's tough,
It's just that saturated kind of look that I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a Friday movie.
Yeah, Jason's supposed to be low rent. He looks too pretty in this one.
Yeah, I remember feeling like he kind of had rock star moves almost. Like he kind of posed. He was already a star.
Well, not necessarily Derek Mears, but just the look of the film.
Yeah,
Like, it's. This sounds weird, like we're praising Daniel Pearl, but saying it's completely the wrong look for the film.
I think it's beautiful for what he does, but I think for a Friday the 13th, it's not what people wanted to see.
It's tough. I don't know.
Each other biblically from behind.
Yeah, I just remember feeling too like maybe the characters were a little too obnoxious. Like I wasn't really warm to anybody.
Right. Almost a little. I hate to say scream-like, and almost like too smart, too kind of self-aware.
And then not a little obnoxious,
Right.
But
I guess I don't know. Maybe not so much. I have to think back to even Larry to this day gets hate mail. I hated Shelley.
Yeah. Well, there were there's some. Well, like part 5 was that way. They're so coarse. in a way.
Right.
Like
well,
that.
this is also acting like, what woman would ever go
Yeah,
to
do
the woods
that.
and rub
That's
in the open woods. I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of nudity
I
too.
don't know.
Yeah, and nudity kind of off puts me a bit too.
Maybe.
Just feels so cheap. Like I don't know why do these people have to be so naked all the time? But might be. I may be getting old. I'm an old man now. Yeah.
Yeah, you were a teenage boy.
Yeah. But I always like the ones like, I sided with it, like Ginny Fields, she'd take her clothes off. We didn't see her boobs sticking in the camera. And
She took her top off in one scene.
We never saw her
like
tits,
a full
though.
on.
Yeah. But you wouldn't see her doing that. She wasn't rubbing oil over her.
Right. Yeah, they definitely went more for the prurient.
Yes. Yeah. And they're all fake breasts now, too. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
We live in a plastics world. But I do want to bring up a point. I brought this way, 7 hours ago. I brought up the fact that the kids in the early movies were very kids next door. These are not kids next door.
No, exactly.
These are all cut out of Abercrombie ad.
Well, you would never see this homogenous group in one, looking that way.
And you get to Travis Van Winkle, you get to Amanda Rigetti. I mean, they're all beautiful human beings, and they're all very good looking, and that's great.
Yep.
But that doesn't make you feel like, oh, that could be me.
Yeah.
Because not everybody looks like that.
Well,
except for you.
No, please. Should we say that, by the way, when you said 7 hours, we're serious? This commentary is recorded.
Has been non-stop.
This is not cut in pieces from
rare
different days. Yes.
Break, but we've had no breaks.
I've been peeing in a cup this whole time.
Actually, it's my bag on the side of the...
It's a marathon.
Sure, it's a marathon. I was jokingly saying that we should be in the Guinness Book for this commentary, but maybe you never know.
There's still hope.
And we gotta give props to Jerry Deaton of
Audio
Cut.
Oh yeah,
sound engineer
for being very patient with us.
Wow, has he just I think we're past midnight now.
Yeah, I know. Perfect time for this.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yep.
I'm very rich.
Beautiful house.
And also just the job of mixing a 7-hour show.
Oh yeah. And he and I literally every cue of music you hear in the show, he and I had to piece together, piece by piece. We got a lot of music, but none of it was, placed. It was all cues that we had to kind of sort through. So I've spent months and months on that, just doing that.
I thought that was an interesting choice. I don't know. Because Whitney is basically the final girl, yet she's sort of chained up. So then she kind of becomes. But he's the final boy.
Yeah.
And then so it's interesting to do it that way.
Not one, but two versions.
I'll say I kind of like that, especially when she gets killed at the end. It's like, holy shit, that's your
right.
final girl. They don't die.
Right. But I wish she hadn't died, because she was kind of like.
Well, but then you have two final girls, so how do you do that?
Right.
But I mean, it's interesting that the final girl is chained up and kind of not proactive for most of the movie.
Yeah, she doesn't do much. And how long was she down there in the tunnel? And how did she go to the bathroom? And how did she eat?
Yeah, it was because he was looking for her for over a month. I thought. Remember, he said
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think there was at some point he says how long she's been missing.
Yeah.
Jared Padalecki, who is the male lead of this, and famous for Supernatural, and
very tall person.
Very tall. Have you met him?
I saw him once.
Okay.
I think it was Comic-Con a couple years ago.
He just, he just didn't step up for this.
He lives down the street from me. I'm kidding.
Of course he does.
It was like Comic-Con or something. He was there.
He lives in your guest house.
Yeah.
But
and speaking of Jared Padalecki,
douchebag manner, huh?
Well, early in the film, when he's looking for his sister, he encounters a character named Sheriff Brack.
Well, that's why this is the greatest movie ever made. Of course.
Even though they say your name wrong.
But your last name is Bracky.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
It is.
But
yeah. Well, I will say, I remember it was starting to be in production or whatever, and they were so nice, Shannon and Swift. I'm probably not supposed to say this, but they sent me the script. It was watermarked. They're like, you're not allowed to tell anyone you saw it. But they were nice enough to send it to me. And I remember reading it, and I'm like, oh my God, it says Officer Bracky. I wrote him back saying, is this actually named for me? I almost cried. I was as a fan, as a kid, I never in a million years would think.
I just wouldn't have made you the officer.
I died too. Cool.
I would have just made you, the Scream Queen.
Douchebag Bracky. But I mean, I'm a trivia question now, surprising trivia question. That's amazing, as a fan. So it's cool. So
well, see where it all began, and as difficult as the book was, and there were times where you wanted to give up, and look what you would have missed out.
Yeah. So,
but here, no, look, I mean,
it's awesome.
It was all supposed to be this way.
That is
a fun kill.
Such an important part of this franchise and of horror movies in general. And I
effects were well done.
Yeah.
in this movie. I thought everyone had a really unique and disgusting way to go.
We were talking to the producers, and they were like, "Did you realize there are 13 kills in this movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's intentional."
Part 6 was originally supposed to be 13 kills.
Right, Tom wrote that way, yeah.
I guess. Well, there's 13 kills in part 3, including Jason.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about 4? Was there?
There's 14. Well, that's
including Jason? I can't remember.
Yeah, if you include Jason, it's 14.
14, right.
So there's 13
So Jason kills 13
people, yeah.
So yeah, they got that one.
Although in part 3 you could argue he didn't really die, so I guess there's only 12 kills, but you think he's dead. I don't know.
As Foreman Fuller once explained to me, these kids have got to be fuckable. The guys are going to want to fuck the girls are going to want to fuck the guys in the movie.
So that's putting on the line.
Care.
Yeah.
My character did have some good lines in the film. I know the one that I did not want to say was, "Tits are stupid."
See, again, I just have to say, this cast brought in so much kind of exuberance when they did their interviews. They were fun and kind of game for whatever we wanted to talk about.
Did you notice, like, when I was doing the book, I remember it was hard because the movies were so long ago, they had trouble remembering.
Yeah, and this was all fresh, and, even though they were like, wow, it's been like a few years already, and, I think everybody's moved on and bigger and better things like everyone else, but the cool thing was that everybody was just like, there were a few people that said no, and not necessarily because they were trying to, just avoid talking about it. It was just schedule-wise, or they were doing something else. These are all young working actors now, so, you can't always coordinate schedules, but I'd say, 80% of, maybe 85, 90% of the people we asked, they came forward. We interviewed enough of the cast that, feels complete.
And it's exciting, again, because as a fan, I haven't heard a lot of this stuff. Because it's not in the book, so I think no one knows any of the stuff yet.
We
it's brand new.
We were wondering, we did stop, like Andrew and Tommy and I did stop and say, well, should we, because the book doesn't cover this movie, should we cover it? And we decided, because, at this point, it's been a few years. At some point or another, the book will cover this chapter. It's just, there's some legalities in terms of your publishing contract with New Line and photos and things like that.
Because Warner wasn't involved. Now they're involved.
So you guys are saying I could be home right now? Like, we could be done with this 7-hour commentary, but instead we're...
Just because of me and my lame-ass
Exactly.
decisions.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, let's just throw one more in there for good luck.
The other hard thing with the book is, like, we're kind of waiting for another movie to do a new edition, because I also was afraid, like, I don't want to have to do you don't want to have to do a new book and make people buy the same book every time a new movie comes out.
That's the difficulty. I think in 10, 20 more years, Peter, your book is going to be like, the size of a phone book.
Well, you say, well, what do you do 2 books then? You do one for, Up to Forever's Jason, a second volume, from the remake onward? I don't know.
Memories Volume 2.
Yeah, you wonder how long this is. Because my fear has always been the series is going to go direct to video. Like, I always wanted to be theatrical.
Yeah. This cracks me up, this whole part of the movie, and I had to ask everybody, like, why didn't you go out and help them?
Yeah. Well, weren't
that's
they
a
talking
douchebag
about
thing.
it?
I mean, sorry, they were talking about it. But Jared Padalecki is the hero of the movie. And he's like, we can't go out there. You would think he would have made some attempt.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I died.
There's 4 or 5 of them. They
3
can.
or 4 times in the movie.
This is funny.
I get suffocated by Jason, and I get hung on these hooks, and I get shot through a door, and I get thrown out a window.
That's right. Oh.
I mean, see what happens when you have sex. They really brought the message home here.
They did.
There you are.
Yay! It's a good death too.
It's a good death. It's like the Terry Hatcher's husband from Desperate Housewives.
It is. I know.
That's who
they got someone great to play me. I always thought it would be funny. It'd be weird if I ever did a new chapter. I have to interview myself and like, how do I mention that reference?
Just say Peter douchebag.
I love it.
Where we run from upstairs to downstairs,
and we're coming down the stairs. I'm backing down as fast as I can, like pretending like I'm a freaking FBI agent or something, and I run into Danielle and I slam her to the wall.
He somehow pushed me into the windowsill, and I hit my chin, and I split my chin open and fell back and gave myself a concussion.
She hits her head, and she almost gets knocked out on the face. She had to go to the hospital. Like it was just bad.
So
it's kind of like Amy Steele and
Steve
Dash.
Forever remind me of
except the girl gets it this time.
Yeah. Justice.
I mean, I guess it was.
That's what he just says.
Oh, did he?
It's payback.
Oh.
She ran off with the other guy. That's what she gets.
Although Travis was kind of his character was a douchebag is a word here.
Yeah. But his scream is.
It's hilarious. It's like the
here. Watch this.
Of the Friday the 13th films.
He got the Reggie the Reckless screen, kind of.
Kinda. Did we put Reggie in there? We didn't put
No.
Reggie in.
Well,
We should have put
Pam
Reggie.
was next to Reggie.
Yeah.
You wanted the
That was
audience
it's better with the girl. That's hilarious.
slowly hate me and hate me more and more, so that when I died, it was a big payoff.
Are we forgetting anything, you guys? I think we're all checking out at this
I
point.
know,
'cause
no,
we're so
no.
tired.
Who's still listening to this commentary?
If anybody is, you're
Well,
brave
I have to
soul.
stop myself because I want to watch because I haven't seen it.
Right,
so,
right.
No, he's also.
Yeah, he had a great death scene though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty brutal stuff.
Yeah.
He's in
cool.
Transformers as well, and I think his name in that
Is
is
he?
Trent as well.
Trent,
Oh,
oh,
really?
really?
He was the asshole. He was the jerk, and as we all know,
I always thought it was interesting.
we want those people to die. So
Earlier in the movie, remember it was when Jared Padalecki goes to that woman, the old woman?
Yeah.
He's looking for his sister. And they almost imply that the town knows Jason's
That's
there.
right.
And they
That's
protect
exactly what
and
they
this
do.
truck
That's like
driver,
it's
there's
his-
a body on the back of his car. He drives
Just-
away
I guess
anyway.
he was just maybe trying to escape.
Yeah, it's time to get the fuck out of there.
Right.
But like he's almost like he knew, okay, that's Jason killing someone, so I'm gonna take off.
Supposedly.
He's not like shocked at what's
But
going
yeah,
on.
that definitely had that chainsaw
Yeah.
vibe where the community knew that
Yeah.
Leatherface was kind of around.
Yeah.
And you better just kind of keep your distance. And I think they definitely were like, you kind of almost like interchangeable.
Yeah, I kind of wish they had more of a Crazy Ralph character though. you
That
know?
would've been good.
Yeah, you know.
Quintessential Jason
We
movie.
missed that.
Yep.
She doesn't have sex.
Also, how did Jason build these underground tunnels? I mean, that's
Well,
like, that
yeah.
requires a crane. And
I don't know if
crew,
it was
you know,
supposedly
I
like
don't know.
old mining tunnels from back
Under
in
a
the day.
camp?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a camp back then.
Platinum Dunes partners closely watching over the set.
This is an Andrew Cash photo that he'd love to.
What is
have.
that?
It was just them standing by the police
Oh,
car. I
cool.
think they took some flack.
That's
for
right,
being,
I think- oh.
You know.
The working relationship
Douchey.
that I have with my
It's getting late, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm out of my vocabulary is
I
just
know.
gone
It's
right
breaking
down
down.
the-
It's falling apart.
It is.
That's cute.
Visual guy.
I actually remember interviewing Jason, Marcus Nispel for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre press junket. Him saying, you know, you do one horror movie and you do it well, and that's all you do. But I guess
Yeah.
that didn't.
Well, Pearl
he came
said
back.
that he needed his career needed another shot in the arm, so he tried it one more time and see if it would
Yeah.
work out.
Yeah.
I think it was just more personality things going on the set. You know, there was a lot of just dissension in terms of like the work that was getting done, and their script was being changed all the time, and there was just problems. You know, just communication between.
But it seemed like the cast bond, like they
The cast did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely hung out.
Yeah.
For, you know, and they still do.
That's great.
There may have been something between them, but by the time it gets to us actors, everybody's, you know, it's like mom and dad. If they fought, it was when we went to bed.
I realized this
Very
is
true.
no way to carry on making a film. We have to somehow arrive at an amicable agreement where we can just carry on, and you know.
I like that Daniel Pro was very honest. You know,
Mhm.
he came to my house and shot this
Oh,
interview,
great.
and it was again a last minute kind of thing. Not last minute, but it was one of the last ones we got. We weren't able to get him initially. He actually didn't want to do it, but he felt like I need to say something about this.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he did. I'm glad he was
Yeah.
candid.
The original ending.
I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna like be angry of the fact
No,
that
no.
somebody said there were, you know, like every movie there's problems.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
always, you know, issues.
That's
with-
one of the things. Okay.
It's, you know, it's one of those. It's like you go to war together,
Mhm.
and you don't always love people you have to go to war with, but you gotta kind of end up, you know, being on the same team.
Well, especially with low budget movies, you know, it's
Yeah.
totally different. Well, this isn't really low budget anymore.
No,
I suppose,
but you know, it's still in that realm of. You know,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
not a
making
big-
movies is just not
Yeah.
easy, and there's a whole lot of things that go into it that people you don't see. And these, you know.
Well, it was, it was one of the things about the book was exciting was, well, it was tough to ride the line of like I wanted to show that you know movie making is hard and there's battles and you have to fight things and not have it be like these glossy DVD featurettes where everyone loves each other and it's
Right,
perfect
right.
and then
Yep.
you know that's a bunch of crap.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to get into petty stuff where people are just being gossipy. So
Right.
it was tough. There
It's
are
like
a
that
couple
fine
things.
line. I think we kind of followed your again, like you sort of
It's tough.
started that sort of trend of you know telling these honest
Yeah.
stories. We did it again in Never Sleep Again. People liked it. I hope
Yeah.
they appreciate the stories
Yeah.
we're telling here, which are not you know, it's not like National Enquirer kind
Yeah.
of you know gossip rag kind of bullshit.
Well, I
But
remember
this is really
yeah.
how they all came to the table. This cast in particular with a very kind of you know here's the way it went.
Yeah. Well, I remember my line I drew, and maybe I was wrong in a couple of moments, but was as long as it was about the movie. Like, if people, you know, it was never like, oh, I didn't like that person, and he was bitchy, and we went to the mall together, and she stole my boyfriend. Like, you know, because there was a lot of, you know, there is stuff like that.
Right,
you know,
sure,
people
yeah.
have ways, you know, romance and all that stuff, but it had nothing to do with, but it has nothing to do with the making the movie. It shouldn't be in there.
Right. And that's why I thought the Daniel Pearl's comments were appropriate, because he was able to shed some light on that. People know about it.
I'm going to have a bite of my pizza.
Thank you. We didn't get drunk during this. I
No,
mean,
we didn't.
Buzz
That's
and
good.
Andrew
We got
and those
pizza.
guys on the Never Sleep Again commentary were like blitzed by the end of that.
Oh. Well, what for the second commentary we do? We can,
Right, that would be
that
track
fortune,
two.
yeah.
And because actually Luke is going to do that. He's going to stay for another 7
10
hours and
hours
do
to
that,
do that
one as
for
well.
us,
And
yeah.
we'll come pick him up in the
Yeah.
morning.
Could you imagine? Oh.
Any film that gets remade ever.
I'm loving the graphics behind everybody.
Yeah, that's
They're
Christopher
beautiful.
Shy's artwork,
Yeah, they're
all
gorgeous.
concept art. Thank you. Yeah, it was
It's nice and
I
colorful.
wasn't sure if we should use that stuff back there,
I
but
think
it
it's
was all
great.
kind of
It doesn't
just give it
surprise
a
me
kind of a
there were
different look.
people that weren't happy or satisfied with the way they depicted where Jason was living.
What's the
and
cool
how
thing
he
about,
was
you know,
living.
documentary versus a book? You know, this is visual, so it works in a visual way. And it's
But, you know,
a different
again, I
feel.
hope
It's
it
cool.
stands next to the book, and
Yeah,
we can, you
it's-
know,
yeah,
sell
absolutely.
that box set
Uh-huh.
of you can buy the book and you can buy the document, whatever.
Yeah.
But it all kind of goes hand in hand, and I'm glad that the two.
Totally.
I think you needed a respite from all this, and a lot of things happened. But I think, you know, this is the show that we would have wanted to make anyway. So I'm glad we
I
finally
agree.
got to do it.
Yeah.
I think we probably talked about a little bit about doing this at the time. I think
I
we were
think,
burnt out. I think we
yeah.
all moved on to other things and parts of
Yeah.
our lives for a while. But you know, but I'm happy that we got to.
And
do
now we
this at
suckered
long
Luke
last.
into this whole
I know.
tempest.
Well,
so many other people.
Because we are fans, and I mean,
It never dies, does it?
Just, he signed up.
I know.
He said yes. I said, you don't know what you
Well, it was a weird period. I remember after Freddy vs. Jason, before the remake, I was wondering, well, is Friday going to die out finally? And nope. It keeps going.
No. And I don't think it will. For,
Yeah.
Who knows when, if ever.
Yeah, I don't know what's interesting in another movie or what's going to happen.
I mean, you do have to wonder if one day they will get to, like, you know, son of Jason.
Yeah, I don't, you know.
I mean, we created the son of Michael Myers in 6, so that character's still
Yeah.
around if ever that comes about.
Well, again, my big worry is just the way that theatrical is going. It seems like a lot of horror goes direct to video Netflix now.
Yeah.
So I wonder, you know, is it going to go direct to video eventually? Which I would, you know,
Maybe.
I wish it was, you know, I'm a theatrical person, you know. So you don't want to see.
Well, as long
it
as
go
it
that
keeps
way.
making this kind of money, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, this
hopefully,
movie
yeah.
was, although maybe not completely well received, it did do very well.
Well, it had the biggest opening weekend for a horror sequel. Or it was a horror. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was definitely the
huge.
biggest
Over 40 million.
earner
Yeah,
of all the slasher remakes.
Yes,
it made more
that's
than
true.
even the Halloween remake.
Yeah.
It did better than
It did. But it had a really steep drop off.
Yes, second weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but you know,
but it proves
if
that
you
people
love-
turn out for it. So
and Jason keeps going.
Mm-hmm. And so are we.
Yep, we keep going and going. My friend Joe O'Brien from Toronto, he actually did this animation, which I thought was very cool, with a little ripple of Jason's air underneath the water.
I always like that photograph. Richard
Great.
Fury took that photograph. He used to stay in the cabins of the first movie, and he went out one morning and just took a shot of an empty canoe on the water.
Nice.
So it actually is from part 1.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And look what we have here.
Actually, because Mark Mansuno did it. He did a wonderful. I mean, I thought it's really classy looking. I really liked what he did.
I just like that we used that at the end of the show, and you'll see here, like, we actually talk about the book in this chapter and how it came about, and,
cool.
and you'll see footage of the party, and I just wanted to kind of bring it all together at the end of kind of what this means to us. You know, I mean, this is a personal show in a lot of ways. It's for it's for the fans of Friday the 13th, but it's kind of the experience that we had.
That was actually really fun for me in the book to do. Like, it was fun doing the wrap up because people could just sort of freeform it, and it was fun to just sort of see. It was really kind of emotional in a way.
It is.
People
And
realized
this
that
is-
meant something. You know?
Yeah, this is a little bit too.
Yeah, definitely.
Lives of people who have viewed it in a very special way.
That's how people saw me, as kind of the
Is that photo that was
Amy
like
just
just
put out there.
released?
Yeah, that's a new one.
Oh,
Amy
cool.
keeps digging into her archives and teasing us with these photos.
Cool.
Carry it with me for the rest of my life. This fun cult film. It's something to talk about. It's a great conversation starter.
I say I was in Friday the 13th, and I gave Jason a hockey mask.
I took that
Nobody
picture.
doesn't know.
I think for me, like,
Everyone knows what that is.
one of the most gratifying things is when some of the actors have said, like, I didn't get it, and now I get it. Like, it, they realize that people they affected people's lives.
Yeah,
and that's nice. In a
and
small
all
way.
of ours.
Small way.
We wouldn't be here if it didn't.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, I have the story of Frank Makers writing me letters. The fact that he took the time to write like a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Just says something about the fact these weren't just movies made by a bunch of sleazeballs. These were
Yeah.
people who were making, I won't go as far as saying high art, but
Yeah.
they certainly were committed to what they were doing, and they understood that people enjoyed them, and that they had an audience of very loyal fans that live on to this day.
Well,
I think that's, we can speak for us, but there's like 1,000,
oh yeah,
100,000 stories out there that we could have included that we didn't include. But so many perspectives. But I wanted this chapter, kind of like the last chapter of your book, to kind of be that personal, kind of, I don't know, final stamp.
Well, I guess in some weird way these are classics. I'm happy people enjoy them and can laugh about it and not take us all too seriously.
A lot of actors tend to kind of shy away from it, kind of put it in their past, look the other way, act like it's a porn or something.
I wonder who those
they're not
people
proud
are.
of. For me, I feel quite differently about it. I'm grateful.
But yeah, it was interesting. The experience of making the movies was often so different than how they were perceived.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And they are horror movies that were designed for a very specific purpose. But I know I'm just proud of the fact that that we've lived with this for so long, but we've been able to kind of come full circle with this documentary and having done the book. And it was really great to be able to meet all of these people that we grew up kind of seeing them on the screen or seeing their name on the screen and getting that chance, just like when you went down the road with the book and kind of getting to embrace this for a period of our lives.
I mean, you have to work to make a living, but that's probably the only time in my life. I mean, I've had other good work experiences, but I remember getting up every day and being, oh my God, I get to do this. Like, when does that happen?
And
oh my God,
this is the launch of Peter's book, and it was
that's Carrie Noonan on the right,
Carrie
Nancy
Noonan,
McLaughlin, second
Nancy.
from right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, and
that's
everyone
everyone signing. Oh my God,
books.
that was a huge production to get everyone to sign.
Oh my God,
the cake.
Yep,
that was cool.
Special time.
Dinah Barrows.
Stressful. It was the end of a very stressful period.
Yeah.
We were all. You and I were just so tired at that
well,
point.
that was weird because I had pulled my back a few days earlier.
That's right. Yeah.
So I was having these back spasms, and the doctor gave me this muscle relaxer. So I was in this weird
I don't remember that.
state. Yeah. Like,
wow.
Yeah. So.
And there they are. There's
baby Stephanie.
There's baby Stephanie with her
parents.
Yeah.
Well,
Friday the 13th has been an anchor.
Well, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think part 7 with the whole outsider thing. Like, not to be again, too cheesy, but it did teach me as a kid, like, you can survive the night, like you can make it through, like there's darkness in the world, but you can live through it and survive and triumph and all that. And it's cheesy, but it's true.
But it's everybody, we deal with that every day in our lives in this world, and there's, yep.
That's what inspired him to be an actor.
I had a little bit of a argument with Andrew over that segment. He didn't want to include it, and I kind of kept pushing him to put that Hugh Jackman thing in.
That's fine.
I think it's a cool little trivia bit, and I bet you a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Now they do.
They're healthy. I don't think they're negative on society. I think
That's the other thing too. I remember as a kid. I mean, people really were frightened. Like, this was going to be this negative, horrible thing.
Yeah,
and
the
now
world was going to go to hell in a
and all it did was influence a bunch of filmmakers.
Yeah.
So and me, so
and you,
and us.
Totally.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a huge
and so
life-changing
many people. I mean, so many
thing.
young filmmakers coming up that we don't know their names yet.
Yeah.
But they're watching this, going, "Wow, maybe if these guys did this, I can do this."
I
think if we can kind of and I think in a way, like Never Sleep Again, and obviously starting with your book, it kind of started doing this thing where a lot of people are doing these kinds of documentaries now. I forgot.
Seems
were
like
you telling me who was telling me what else is going on out there? There's a couple of other ones that are obviously the guys that did the Jaws documentary after major. I mean, those guys.
The Shark is not working.
Yeah,
Shark is still working.
I mean, unbelievable.
Oh, they got Spielberg. I mean, that's
they got
insane.
everyone. Yeah,
insane.
they really did an amazing job with that. Paul Davis did one on American Werewolf in London, and there's just a whole bunch of those that have just come
Isn't there a
down
Return of
the
the Living
road.
Dead one too? Obviously?
Yeah, right. Tommy and a few people from our team did the Return of the Living Dead, and we did one on Scream.
Well, Nightmare, of course, never seen
Nightmare,
it.
Yep. But there are more of them coming down the road now, and it's just not just from us. I mean, I'm kind of saying for a while, this is the end of the road for me for these shows.
I never want to take credit. I mean, hopefully we were influenced, but like, I feel like too after like the box set and everything started coming out. the studios realized, hey, there's a market, fans of these horror movies.
That's my nephew Michael when he was really small. Sorry.
I was saying, fans of the horror movies want to see this stuff. So like all these, every kind of slasher movie now seems to have a special edition DVD. You know what I mean? Like I think before they were dismissed, like I don't think the studios thought there was an audience for this stuff.
But I'm glad that they don't take umbrage with us doing things like this. They almost, I think maybe they turn a blind eye to these shows and your book and whatever. Maybe the studios don't go out of their way to promote what we're doing. But they also certainly don't stand in our way.
No.
They've been very gracious. We have to give a lot of thanks to, I have to say, like David Kenny at Paramount and Jeff Katz, obviously, and all the people from the New Line regime from back then and even now. And nobody has really ever, come out and objected to the content of our shows. Or, I mean, I think they realize that what we're doing is really showing a lot of love for these movies, and and we're also showing a lot of appreciation. And I hope it helps promote whatever projects they're working on.
Absolutely.
It works in tandem with each other, and I'm glad that we're able to do these and tell this version of the story.
Absolutely. It's just, all this is amazing.
It's look at, there's your book.
Yeah.
And the game.
Yeah, I love the game.
And look at Camp Crystal Cake.
No, did they really have that?
Well, we wish they did. But a fan actually made that, and I was like, you have to put that in.
Real.
I would eat it. I would eat it right now. My throat's on fire. That ice cream would feel good. But I just love it. This was the convention that you and I went to in New Jersey.
Oh, I was terrified.
Yeah,
I
you did
remember
the
that.
panel.
I'd never done that before.
But hey, look, this is all just a great feeling. For me, there's a lot of pride in this and seeing this all come together. And just, I'm so grateful, Luke, to you for truly being an angel and a guiding light during the making of this. And Andrew, and he's not here tonight, and Benny and Tommy, of course. And everybody who worked on the show. I mean, a lot of devotion went into this for a very long period of time.
Well, I really have to thank you guys. I mean, like, I'm just a kid from Southern. You always hear that. Like, I'm just a kid from Southern Illinois. Like,
we all
Me too.
are.
Yeah, we all are.
I'm the kid from Santa Rosa. He's the kid from.
And I just happened to meet
Chicago.
Peter at a movie, and like, here I am. I've always, my entire life, I've wanted something to do with Friday the 13th, and now.
Well, now you know how it really goes. And 7 hours later, we're right back to where we started. And I just think, what a journey. Whew, I'm tired. But this was fun. I mean, this is where we kind of come full circle around back to the campfire with Corey, and we get to see the result of this Friday the 13th.
I remember filming this, and like, I never had fake blood on, and it was dripping all down our clothes, and I was giggling, and everyone was very hard to keep a straight face.
Fun to do, though.
Yeah, and the blood was all in my eye. Yeah, I look pretty good with the machine.
You do.
Yeah.
Wear that more often.
I should. Good look.
But this was, this was great fun to do, and I think for however many 25 years we've been waiting to see Corey Feldman put the hockey mask on. So,
it's like our own little Friday the 13th movie.
It kind of was simple, but hopefully effective. And that's the Crash Cunningham mask, Very fun, and it was great to do this and kind of play with some of these Friday the 13th tricks with the white, going to white. I just think it's great that this little segment has become kind of a trademark of all of our shows. We did it in His Name Was Jason. We kind of continued it on through all of our documentaries, and it's just hilarious and fun to see everybody talk about their, recite their classic lines from the movies, and we just had a blast doing this stuff.
It's that creep Shelley. What a sick sense of humor.
Everyone's a good sport too.
They are all good sports about it.
I have seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never.
But I think, bringing everybody back, and this really kind of, again, as we said a little bit earlier, just brings everything full circle, and I'm just touched and pleased that we were able to have this experience.
Oh, yeah.
On so many levels. Now,
I think it's great. And you guys, I want to just say thank you for being a part of this tonight and hanging in there for this crazy marathon session. And I think we all... It's been a trial by fire.
I just want to thank, as a writer I just want to thank everyone, like the fan. I still get letters every once in a while or Facebook messages. Like, people really enjoy the book. And I'm just so grateful because I wrote it as a fan for fans and just wrote the book that I wanted to see when I was a kid. It's the fact that people enjoy it. It's amazing because a lot of times you work really hard on something and it just disappears.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't believe I'm sitting here watching a documentary based. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
Well, it all just kind of happened the way sometimes things are supposed to happen, and we put a lot of heart and energy into this, and I hope people appreciate what we've done with this, and I hope it stands the test of time the way your book has, and I hope we all can kind of come together for something else, something else that
Kreestahl Memories Part 2.
Electric Boogaloo?
I still can't believe I'm sitting here. I remember wanting your book so bad, and I think my sister bought it for like my birthday or Christmas. She actually says any success you have from this is because of me. Because I bought that book for you.
True. Yeah, and it keeps going and going.
But I just like this documentary, it just keeps going and going. But really, this was a blast to work on. It's incredibly difficult. I'll be so glad that I get to go to sleep finally when this is done. Take some time off from all of this stuff and make some of our own movies that I think maybe someday people will make documentaries about the movies that we're doing.
I think anyone who actually listened to all 7 hours of this too
is probably asleep by now. But we really had a great time, and again, how much fun is it to finally meet these people and get them to say these lines in front of you? You can put the hat on.
How did you pick which line to give them?
I picked all the fun ones, and we just kind of in the editing process we just wheedled them down to the ones that were kind of the most fun.
Nobody's gonna touch the ray of sunshine.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Peter, you just say the lines.
I'll just do it. It's sad that now they're going to say.
The game, that flag.
Never should have let her play.
Oh God, somebody help! He's trying to kill me! You're not just a lousy doctor. You're a blank.
Just great. I mean, we could just sit here and laugh with all the fans who are watching this at home, but it really was a blast. And how cool was it to just like sit there in front of the camera and let these people tell us, recite the lines that we all remember from the movies. If you love the movies as much as we do, you know what every single one of these means. And again, I just do want to give a shout out to so many people. I mean, there were, it was a small group, but a very dedicated one, from Andrew and Buzz and you guys and Tommy and Blake and Mikey and on and on and on and on, Lindsay and Benny. We couldn't have done this without any of those people, and everybody just came together in a big way. And Jerry, who's been sitting out there so patiently.
I know.
I don't know how many hours. But truly, this show wouldn't exist without you guys, and I can't even begin to thank you for what you put forward.
Wow.
And I'm glad that the fans have been so supportive and hanging in there with us. We announced this release months and months ago, and it's been a long time in the making. And anyway,
I remember that happened with the book too. Yeah, keep pushing the release back, but people are very patient.
So thank you all very much, and thanks for listening.